A crowded train of commuters heading to their destination. But for one unlucky passenger, he's on his way to a very unexpected destination. He purchased his ticket the same way as he did every other day and had it punched by the conductor. But soon he started to get the impression that something was wrong. Very wrong. He felt like he needed to get off the train immediately, but every time he tried, he was blocked. Sometimes the exit out of his seat was blocked. Other times a crowd of passengers would be entering at the same exact time he tried to get off the train, preventing him from leaving until the door slid shut. As the train got closer to its final stop, his panic grew, because today this train wasn't taking him to work. It was taking him to the end of the line. SCP-4049 is one of the most benign appearing objects known to the SCP Foundation, and also one of the trickiest to find. That's because it's never exactly the same object twice. It's a ticket to any form of mass transit, usually taking the form of the type that's closest to wherever it manifests, though most of the time it appears as a train ticket to a crowded nearby hub. It was first discovered in Chicago in 1936, where its terrible powers became clear. But even though decades have passed, it hasn't changed at all, because SCP-4049 is a predator, and one that goes to great lengths to trap its prey. When it's picked up by an unsuspecting passenger, it will appear as whatever the most likely method of transportation is for the person to use. But if it remains on someone's person for an extended period without being used, it will start to change. When not being directly observed, usually tucked away in a wallet or pocket, it will shift into another form, one more likely to be used by the person holding it. And in this form, it's harmless, but it doesn't stay that way. When it's validated for transit by being stamped, torn, punched, or accepted by a conductor or driver and thrown away, it activates. And the unfortunate person who used it to board a vehicle has been snared in its web. As soon as they board and their ticket is taken, they become incapable of exiting the vehicle. It seems like things conspire to keep them on the vehicle until the very end of the line, at which point the passenger vanishes mysteriously. But before they go, things get strange. Soon after boarding, the unlucky passenger finds themselves tormented by a bizarre series of symptoms. They start to see the sky as darker than it is, and they hear disturbing things. Ordinary messages from the conductor become menacing. They start to see other passengers and random objects as threats, and become terrified of any employees. As the journey continues, they sink into hopelessness and fear as they realize that there is no way off, and they become impossible to calm down. The end is always the same, but it's what SCP-4049 does next that makes it a bigger threat. Shortly after it has completed this cycle and the passenger has vanished into thin air, SCP-4049 regenerates whole as a ticket to the same form of mass transit in a nearby location, just waiting for someone to pick it up and begin the cycle again. Studies have shown that it cannot be distinguished from any other train ticket when on the loose, meaning that if it breaches containment, it can be near impossible to track down. During a past containment breach, it caused multiple disappearances around the New York City area over the course of 6 months before being contained again. Once they had it contained though, the Foundation was determined to figure out its secrets. With no survivors to talk about their experience, the Foundation fell back on their most reliable source of experiments: D-Class personnel. Tests were begun, and a D-Class was given the ticket to use on a local bus. Agents were stationed at every bus stop to observe without interfering. At first, the D-Class seemed unaffected, but as the trip went on, it became clear he knew something was wrong. He paced up and down the aisles, stared out the window in horror, and eventually pounded on the windows in panic as the bus drove away from its last stop, the driver seemingly unaware that anyone was still on the bus. And then, as a strange mist filled the bus, which obscured the agent's vision, he was gone. Passengers who had been on the bus were interviewed, but most didn't notice anything, though many said they felt ill while riding the bus or were distracted. A surprising number said they felt like something was wrong but couldn't identify it. A pair of boys, however, reported more. They said that the D-Class tried to get off the bus multiple times. His attempts to ring the bell were ignored. The doors closed before he could exit, and he would get pushed to the back of the line. Even when he sat at the front of the bus, he was never able to make it out. When hypnotized to uncover repressed memories, one of the boys admitted that he saw passengers shove the unfortunate D-Class back, and ended by screaming that it seemed as if the bus swallowed him in the end. It was clear that to understand SCP-342 fully, the Foundation would need to investigate further. Another D-Class was assigned, this time to ride the subway using the Doom ticket. But he wouldn't be alone. Agent Strahan would be riding with him and would be taking notes throughout. The D-Class seemed to become angry as soon as he boarded, but then something strange happened. Agent Strahm and the D-Class were separated by a pair of security guards who seemed concerned that they, and only they, would not be too close on the train. Was the ticket manipulating the people around it? Agent Strahm was able to get close enough to keep records on the D-Class's movements and interview him, and nothing unusual seemed to be happening to the man's body. But after the D-Class asked to leave the train and was denied, he became aggressive, swinging on the bars and acting like a monkey, which led to Agent Strahm having to knock him unconscious and handcuffing him to a pole. Deciding that he gathered enough information, Agent Strahm decided to abort the mission and try to help the D-Class exit the train, but now found himself blocked by the crowd. Even when he raised his badge and claimed to be a U.S. Marshal, he was ignored. He would report later that he was pulled back, but he didn't think it was passengers doing it. Agent Strahm had one last card to play. He handcuffed himself to the now panicked D-Class as they approached another station. As he attempted to exit the train, he was struck by passengers and his badge was knocked away. But when he asked them why they were acting the way he did, they all claimed to know nothing. It was clear they wouldn't be able to get off the train on their own. 4 more agents were deployed to the train to extract the 2, and they were accompanied by the leader of the whole project. It was time for Dr. Gunther to have his first encounter with SCP-342. The group of SCP agents was barely able to deter the crowd until one fired his weapon into the air. They were able to evacuate the subway of all other passengers and cordoned off the D-Class. An agent ordered the driver to stop the train, but he seemed to not understand. The train only finally stopped when the power was cut. At this point, they tried to extract the D-Class, but he seemed blocked from leaving by some sort of invisible wall. As they attempted to remove the wall near him from outside, the subway suddenly started again, the doors closing and leaving the agents and Dr. Gunther behind. SCP-342 would not be denied. Agents were unable to catch up to the train before it departed, and they were forced to race to the next stop. Crowds filed onto the train, and when the agents and the doctor were able to board, they found no trace of the D-Class or Agent Strahm. It was expected that both were gone for good, but Agent Strahm was found 8 kilometers away, comatose, with his end of the handcuff still attached, but the other end was cut cleanly away, as if it had simply vanished, along with the man on the other end, only a few splatters of blood being all that remained of the unfortunate D-Class. The Foundation now knew that the effects of SCP-342 were inescapable, but they didn't know exactly what happened to its victims. Agent Strahm, deeply disturbed by his close encounter, had to know the truth of what SCP-342 did to its victims. He volunteered to be the next test subject and would not be dissuaded. He was accompanied by 2 agents he was close to, along with Dr. Haber, on what he knew would likely be a one-way trip. He seemed strangely calm and curious as he embarked on his last ride, making no effort to leave, and refused to even try to exit the train when his supervisors encouraged him. But Dr. Haber insisted, and that's when everyone found out just how far SCP-342 would go to prevent interference. A homeless man suddenly lunged forward and attacked Dr. Haber with superhuman strength. The man was shot by Dr. Haber and Foundation agents waiting at the next stop and removed the possessed man and the doctor for medical treatment, along with everyone else on the train. After the evacuation, Agent Aaron chose to remain alone with Agent Strahm, and they took the last step of this strange journey together. As the train continued on, Aaron began seeing hallucinations, including odd shadows lurking around his vision. Strahm remained calm, even as his visions got worse and worse. He saw Agent Aaron turning into a demon, and the train itself looking like it was melting. But things were about to get even stranger. It was the end of the line, and Agent Aaron felt the movement of the train stop. But Agent Strom believed the train was pulling away, and suddenly he began to move, pulled towards the front of the train and into the closed conductor's room, moving right through the solid metal. The last thing Agent Aaron saw was an unknown creature, a giant spider wrapping Agent Strom up and pulling him away. But the creature knew it wasn't alone. It turned to Agent Aaron and ordered him off the train. Agent Aaron was found at the back of the train in a panic, having gotten close to something no person had ever seen and lived to tell. This gave the Foundation their first clear idea of what SCP-342 might actually do. It seemed like those who held the ticket were forced to continue their ride beyond this realm, on a sort of shadow train, until they reached whatever this creature waiting for them was. Further experiments would focus on figuring out exactly how the ticket worked, and whether it could be tricked in any way. They discovered that the ticket didn't activate on private buses where the subject was the only passenger. It seemed to only interact with real transportation systems filled with commuters. Even when unsuspecting passengers were added and new drivers were hired, the ticket didn't activate, though drivers often seemed to be confused when used in this experiment. But further testing was needed to find out just what role the driver played in all of this. It was difficult to find a bus driver who would agree to the Foundation's terms, but one named Bucky Falsworth signed on to manage the doomed ride. A D-Class with the ticket would board midway through his ride, and Falsworth would then be switched out for an SCP agent who would finish driving the route. But things went terribly wrong. Rather than switch out at the appropriate spot, Falsworth drove on. He became obsessed with driving the bus to its destination, stopping for nothing, even killing a pedestrian in the process, and ultimately had to be taken out by a sniper's bullet. In the aftermath, some bodies were never found, including the unfortunate D-Class used as a subject. Not dissuaded by their disastrous results, agents would try this experiment again, but this time with subway trains. There would be multiple trains, some driven by agents of the Foundation who could control the route, but invariably the ticket-bearing test subjects would find themselves on the unsafe trains driven by civilians. The same effect that conspired to keep them on the train conspired to get them on, and tragically, in one attempt to get a subject off the train, Dr. Haber was caught in the door and killed when his head hit a stone ledge. After this, it was determined that future experiments were too dangerous. The Foundation was finally done with SCP-342, but the ticket wasn't done with them. Dr. Johannes Gertram was the first to fall prey to the ticket's persistence. The subject of an early experiment where he tore the ticket but never got on the bus, he lasted a year and retreated to an on-site safe zone where he chronicled his experiences. He was haunted and obsessed with thoughts of the train, developed a fear of roads, and spent weeks working in his office to avoid going home. His behavior became increasingly unstable, and after being dismissed from the office and put on house arrest, it's believed he slipped out of his house and boarded a bus one morning, finally accepting his fate and letting SCP-342 claim him. The ticket has not been used since experiments were discontinued and was only taken out of storage for archiving by Dr. Gunstler and Dr. Clef. They examined it, discussed the failed experiments, and then left for their evening plans, seeing a musical at a nearby theater. As the night went on, Dr. Gunstler seemed to become more and more disturbed. While sitting at a bar after the show, Dr. Gunstler told Dr. Clef that it was time for him to leave and handed Dr. Clef an envelope before getting into the taxi. Dr. Clef looked inside the envelope, and he saw that it contained 2 identical tickets for Dr. Gunstler's seat at the theater. As Dr. Clef approached a trendy bar with a $20 cover charge, he checked the envelope again and found that the second ticket had turned into a $20 bill. Dr. Clef raced back to the spot where Dr. Gunstler had boarded the taxi, but the scientist had already driven off down an alleyway that terminated in a dead end. Dr. Gunstler was never seen again. The ticket had displayed a new ability. It could become something completely different. Currently, SCP-342 is safely contained and poses no risk as long as it is not used. It is stored in an envelope and stapled to the inside. Experiments with SCP-342 are forbidden, but given that the ticket to ride has shown a unique ability to compel people to take actions that will bring them into its trap, and that it has evolved to take on new forms, caution is warranted. The Foundation advises anyone taking a ticket on mass transit to know exactly where their ticket comes from or they might find themselves taking a much longer trip into the unknown. Let's return to 2003, a time before YouTube. Yes, we know that's a frightening thought. We only ask that you take a deep breath and compose yourself so we can get through the rest of the story. While YouTube may not have been invented for another 2 years, the burgeoning internet of the early 2000s still wasn't without its content creators, posting everywhere from basic social media sites to personal GeoCities websites and specialty forums. One of these early proto-content creators was a man named John Cutler, better known at the time by his online handle, John Station. John Station was, tragically, a man operating before his time. His interests were firmly based on 3 things: mysteries, the paranormal, and urban exploration. If he'd been operating a mere decade later, he would have made a killing on urbex videos or scary 3 a.m. challenges. But instead, he was just sharing his urban exploration photos and videos with a small group of friends on various niche internet forums, like Parawatch, a premier destination for lovers of the strange and unusual online. Little did he know, an anomalous being he was about to encounter was an even more prolific internet user than him. But let's start from the beginning. John Station was making his way to the city of Detroit, Michigan on a Greyhound bus. Detroit had become somewhat of a holy land for dark tourists, photographers, and urban explorers. It had once been one of the most valuable manufacturing hubs in the United States, the very heart of the automotive industry, until all of those manufacturing jobs were outsourced to other countries for cheaper labor. This, along with a number of other factors, led to a devastating economic collapse that the area is still suffering from today, along with a huge number of abandoned residential, commercial, and industrial buildings just waiting to be explored. And John Station planned to start off with a real staple of the urbex genre, a derelict warehouse. He was expecting to get some cool photos of disused machinery and maybe some cool graffiti left by anonymous street artists over the years. But what he certainly didn't expect was a series of 13 massive underground structures hidden below the warehouse. Something that looked like it would have taken decades to even excavate the room for, let alone actually build. The whole thing seemed like some kind of obscenely massive workshop. Strange machinery, shelves upon shelves of paper and notes, spare parts laying around everywhere. What had happened here? But as John Station continued his search into the bowels of this labyrinthine warehouse, he came upon the most strange and disquieting discovery of all: a large glass jar filled with green liquid and a perfectly preserved human brain floating inside. Of course, he took some pictures to share with his forumite buddies and got the hell out of Dodge. John Station had made what was, for any self-respecting Parawatch user, a terrible mistake. Because he was too busy listening to Avril Lavigne on his big, clunky early 2000s headphones, he didn't hear the brain's attempt to communicate with him.
"Oh, hello, young man. Are you here to see my marvelous inventions? Young man?"
But he was already gone by then. Little did John Station know, he just encountered one of the greatest human minds of his generation, Jeremy Valdez, an inventor without equal. And what's more, he may have actually encountered this singularly intelligent individual before. Thanks to Jeremy's brilliant foresight and the invention of a little something he called the V-Wave Universal Ansible, this disembodied brain was connected to the internet. What exactly was it doing with that internet connection? Everything from being a frequent forum poster to selling anomalous technology on the deep web. While we don't know much more than that about the brain's browsing habits, it goes without saying that we'd kill to see a copy of its internet history. When John Station returned home, he posted a picture of the brain to the internet, telling his fellow urbex buddies to go and check the warehouse out. Naturally, this caught the attention of the SCP Foundation, who saw a mysterious human brain hiding in a secretive underground structure in Detroit to be a certifiably anomalous development. And really, they didn't know the half of what they were about to get into. Welcome to the mind of Jeremy Valdez. After all the proper witnesses had been given amnestic treatment, the Foundation secured the warehouse and began exploratory missions into its bowels. It was exactly as John Station reported, a chaos of junk and shelves upon shelves of almost incomprehensible notes and diagrams. While agents searched for the brain of Jeremy Valdez, they encountered what would be later known as SCP-4049-B, his wondrous, anomalous creations. Most of these creations are robotic in nature, with some of them being known as peripherals. creations made specifically to help Valdez continue his research in his disembodied brain form. And they weren't exactly pleased about the Foundation intruding on Jeremy's extremely important research. They tried to defend his secret lair beneath the warehouse and were destroyed in the firefight with Foundation personnel. Only 5 peripherals are active now, which the Foundation uses as collateral in their deal with Valdez for his continued cooperation. To put it less politely, if he doesn't play ball, then the last of his peripheries get terminated. Thankfully for him and the Foundation operatives assigned to his case, Jeremy is a highly cooperative anomaly who has consistently behaved pleasantly towards Foundation staff. That's right, he's able to communicate directly with others by anomalous means. However, while having a direct line to the mind of this enigmatic ball of gray matter would seem like a dream to your typical researcher, the cooperation of Jeremy Valdez has been less valuable than the Foundation initially believed it would be. This is largely because Jeremy's mind appeared to be pretty similar to his workplace. Strange, chaotic, and hard to decipher. When they first asked who exactly he was, his response was,
I am the profound Professor V, the genius who invented the quantum pistol, the rocket to Sagittarius, the window to other worlds. My name is Jeremy Valdez. Jeremy. There was another Jeremy I met once. Well, lots, but the one stuck in my mind. Clever man, salesman. Can't trust them an inch if you give them a mile, but that wasn't me.
He's a little scatterbrained, to put it politely. Many of his answers, while strange and amusing, have been largely useless to the Foundation. For example, when they asked him how he was able to construct the secret facility, he said,
Oh, dug it all out. Tricky bit was the supports. Used solid Valdesium to hold it up. That's my own invention. Name, trademark, patent pending, unless I forgot to send in the application.
And when they asked how he was able to survive as a mere brain in a jar, he had the equally baffling and frustrating response,
Good diet and exercise, healthy living. Oh, and the electrolytes. It's in my notes somewhere, the whole process. Never will look at mashed potatoes the same way, I'll tell you that.
There may be at least some truth to that last one, as the solution inside Jeremy's jar has been tested and proven to be water mixed with electrolytes, sugars, green food coloring, and artificial flavoring. The current working theory on the green food coloring is simply that Jeremy thought it would make his disembodied brain look cooler. Jeremy truly proves that the lines between genius, madness, and outright buffoonery are far more malleable than any of us could have imagined. It's because of Jeremy's forgetfulness that he and his peripheries are such meticulous note-takers, though there is no discernible filing system for this absurd multitude of notes, and the majority of them are written in quick and scratchy shorthand that only Jeremy himself seems to be able to decipher. But of course, the most fascinating part of the story of Jeremy Valdez is his creations. So now we're going to take a better look at those inventions, and some of the stress that the Foundation has been going through in order to track the rest of them down. The peripheries are a varied bunch. Some are as simple as a pair of robot hands that endlessly take notes from Jeremy's unstoppable stream of consciousness. Some are as theatrical as humanoid robots dressed like butlers. We can't help but wonder how Mr. Deeds from SCP-662 would feel about this extra competition. However, the peripheries are really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Jeremy's overall body of work. Let's take a crash course through some of the peculiar inventions they discovered in Detroit. A pistol that fires out powerful X-rays, inexplicably powered by 2 ordinary AA batteries and focused via a non-anomalous quartz crystal. A 6-meter-tall humanoid robot constructed primarily from chrome and steel. A cannon that fires anomalous robot ninjas. No, that isn't a joke. The cannon fires cartridges that anomalously break open, revealing human-sized robots wielding swords and nunchucks. A bin labeled cyborg parts, which was filled with a multitude of cybernetic prosthetic body parts, though none of these parts had any mechanisms that would allow them to interface with the human nervous system. But wait, there's more. A huge excavation vehicle with massive drills and claws that make the dirt it displaces disappear, perhaps explaining how Jeremy managed this little construction project. A rocket-based spacecraft with sediment stuck to its landing gear that indicates it's been on the moon at some point in the past. A force field generator so effective that the Foundation is still unable to penetrate it because Jeremy himself has, unsurprisingly, forgotten how to turn it off. A failed anti-gravity machine that instead just creates more gravity, meaning anything or anyone brought into its vicinity becomes twice as heavy as they would be under normal conditions of Earth gravity. In case you needed a little dose of existential terror today, there's also a complete working simulation of an entire alien solar system. somehow held on only 2 gigabytes of memory. And of course, we wouldn't be doing Jeremy Valdez justice if we didn't tell you how obsessed he is with lasers. The Foundation even found a large containment unit on the site, labeled 713 different laser guns, which contained, yep, you guessed it, 713 different laser guns. We imagine at least 1 or 2 of these ended up in Foundation Armory, or at least the personal office of Dr. Bright. Well, if they could only figure out how this absurd, ridiculous technology actually worked. The most challenging part of containing SCP-4049 isn't the brain itself, though the picture of Jeremy's brain is still circulating out on the internet today if you know where to look. It's finding and containing the anomalous items that Jeremy left laying around in his life before containment. Because Jeremy himself has a brain like a colander, even finding these items is largely a result of picking up clues from his bizarre ramblings, and thousands of pages of nigh incomprehensible notes he won't stop babbling on about. While trying to find one of Jeremy's items in an alley in Boston, Massachusetts, Foundation agents ran afoul of a group of Chaos Insurgency agents searching for the same thing. But this wouldn't be the last peculiar tie between Jeremy and certain groups of interest pitted against the Foundation. In a soup kitchen in Seattle, Washington, the Foundation found that Jeremy had once sold an enlarger ray to agents of the Manna Charitable Foundation, a surprisingly benevolent GOI who use anomalies to help the needy. They used the enlarger ray to enlarge food and fight against hunger in the city's homeless population. And while visiting an area in Boise, Idaho, after Jeremy once mentioned having customers there, the Foundation discovered substantial connections to a member of a Serpent's Hand cell. It seemed to all observers that Jeremy was a kind of anomalous Forrest Gump, a man who had somehow bungled his way through a series of unfortunate arrangements with several of the Foundation's greatest enemies. He's a brain with an awful lot of bad luck. Or is he? Because while the Foundation has bought his bumbling fool shtick hook, line, and sinker, that doesn't mean it's true. In fact, in a classified letter to a member of the Serpent's Hand that worked closely with him in the past, Jeremy presented a very different picture of himself.
Hey Al, I got your letter. Yeah, I'm not too worried about the Seco Pro. They're still digging at the old place. Psychology of the individual man. They're like cats. You run, they're going to chase you. But if they see something else moving, that's where their eyes are, leaving you to jet. The tail? Oh yeah, he's fine. He's designed for this stuff, man. And not like he's really there or anything. They get wise, we pull the plug and get away free and clear. Anyway, I got some new toys I came up with. Robots the size of fleas. They grab onto a guy, get carried wherever. They record what they see, hear, leave with whoever, and detach where you need them. No signal or trace, because they don't broadcast. You get it all when you collect them. I figure it'll be useful for that project of yours. I know, not your usual style, but get with the times, man. If you care to join me in the 22nd century, leave payment in the usual place. Ask Schiltz if you don't remember. And please, man, let me take a look at that hat. I just know I can make it better. You have goddamn lasers firing off your head. Think about it. V. So what do you think? Is Jeremy a bumbling brain in a jar? Or is that very brain a decoy for one of the most ingenious and deceptive masterminds in the anomalous world? An anomalous Kaiser Soze, always staying one step ahead of the Foundation while sending its agents on wild goose chases? Well, the fact we even need to ask shows that Jeremy Valdez is a few steps ahead of us already.
There's a monster under my bed. Almost every parent has heard their kids make the claim, and it's usually nothing more than some unusual shadows, or at worst a household pest scurrying around. Parents usually tell their child to go back to sleep, or maybe try to dispel their fears by shining a light under the bed. It's a childhood rite of passage, and one that usually passes soon enough. But for one young woman in Missouri, the monster under her bed was very real and very dangerous. SCP-3887-A doesn't seem like she belongs in a containment facility. She's a 24-year-old woman who lived a quiet life in her hometown until things went horribly wrong. She doesn't appear to possess any special abilities, and the Foundation is able to contain her without any difficulty. But wherever she goes, death and destruction follow. It's not her doing, but there is something out there that will not stand to see her hurt in any way. Her personal monster under the bed is very protective, something another young woman found out the hard way. Incident 3887-A-1 occurred in 2014. when the young woman was attending a party with her girlfriend. Her partner was berating and humiliating her in front of the guests, which was apparently not a rare occurrence in their relationship. Suddenly, something manifested under a nearby table, and before she could react, her girlfriend was brutally mauled by the unknown creature. Her limbs were completely severed from her body and she died at the scene. An undercover SCP agent who was implanted within the local authorities made their way to the scene as soon as possible and found SCP-3887-A in a state of shock. And who could blame her after the encounter she just had with what would become to be known as SCP-3887-B. While 3887-A is a normal human with no unusual abilities or characteristics, 3887-B is anything but. Foundation scientists have described it as a humanoid entity standing over 7 feet tall. Its skin is greenish-gray, and it has 2 long, sharp horns on its head. Its head and neck are covered in thick black hair, and its eyes are a striking yellow color. Its mouth is full of sharp fangs similar to that of a shark, and its elongated arms allow it to move on all 4s. It has a long, hairless tail that resembles a rat's, and possesses both male and female reproductive organs. No one knows where it came from, but they do have an idea why it's sticking around. SCP-3887-B seems to be bonded to SCP-3887-A, and can appear in any darkened area within a 5-meter radius around her. While its favorite location is under 3887-A's bed, which has since been brought to the facility, it appears to be able to teleport wherever she is, just as it did during the party where it made its presence brutally clear. It has odd eating patterns and is able to gain nourishment from practically any object, whether it resembles what we would consider food or not. Its favorite treats, for example, SCP-3887-A's socks, but it does have one weakness that has been useful in containing it. It can't stand the light, and it doesn't just hate it. When SCP-3887-B is exposed to bright light, it develops blisters and wounds and flees to the nearest dark area. SCP Foundation scientists are at a loss to explain exactly what this creature is, though. And SCP-3887-B seems to be a chimera of multiple animals with multiple types of DNA. It possesses DNA similar to humans, but also from a type of oryx with similar horns, as well as a rat with the same type of tail, as well as a common cane toad. And there's even some DNA that doesn't resemble any creature in nature. Studying it further has been trickier though, because it seems to have the effect of disrupting any electronic recording devices near it, causing lasting damage if it's in proximity to them for too long. There has been one good bit of news for SCP scientists though, because while it has shown that it can be extremely violent, it has not attacked Foundation officials, not yet at least. Its good behavior may not have anything to do with how it personally feels about Foundation staff though, and is instead all thanks to SCP-3887-A. 3887-A has been completely cooperative since she was taken into custody by the Foundation. She doesn't perceive them as a threat, and so far it seems like SCP-3887-B is following her lead. It has a strong emotional connection to the young woman, and when they're alone, they show affectionate behavior towards each other. While the creature does not seem to like the Foundation, it doesn't seem like it wants to become hostile, until the Foundation gives it a reason to. When 3887-A was interviewed following the tragic incident by undercover Foundation agent Bellamy, she was panicked and terrified. She admitted that her partner often treated her badly, and believed that the creature was trying to protect her. She admitted that she had seen the creature before. She even had a name for it. She called her Grenda. 3887-A thought she was crazy. Now there was proof though. She was not imagining the monster under her bed. Describing Grenda as her boogeyman, the young woman talked about how she had known the creature since she was a child. She grew up in an old house in the country that was full of strange sounds that made it sound like something was in her room with her. And sometimes she would even catch a glimpse of what she thought was a monster under her bed watching her. She tried telling her parents, but they thought she was making the whole thing up. And even she was forced to wonder if she was hallucinating. or had somehow imagined the whole thing. But then when she was a teenager, all of her doubts were put to bed. One night, 3887-A's parents were loudly fighting, a sadly not rare occurrence in their household, and she locked herself in her room to get away from them. As she hid, Grenda emerged from under her bed for the first time and talked with her. And she isn't the only one that Grenda is willing to speak with. She's also sat down for her own interviews with Foundation researchers. Well, the researchers sat down, while Grenda remained under the bed. Foundation researcher Dr. Tanner interviewed Grenda, who was cordial but guarded, and remained deeply protective of the girl under her protection. She expressed feeling guilty for getting 3887-A in trouble, but Dr. Tanner assured her that 3887-A was not being punished and was being kept at the Foundation for her own safety. He offered that they could keep Grenda safe as well, but she responded that as long as 3887-A remains safe, then she would be as well. She explained that her kind fed on the anxiety of children, which was why they lurked under their beds. She was apparently only supposed to remain with this girl until she was 10 or so, but became attached and decided to stay with her, which was against the rules of her people, and as a result she had been exiled from her home. At this point, Grenda offered to show herself to the researcher and began to emerge from under the bed. Unfortunately, as has become standard when attempting to document SCP-3887-B, all of the recording equipment malfunctioned and was unable to record Grenda's appearance. The Foundation continued to have questions about this pair and their strange relationship, and interviewed SCP-3887-A again, this time by a Dr. Garden. 3887-A told Dr. Garden that she had been sleeping well and had been spending lots of time talking to the entity under her bed. That led Dr. Garden to bring up a theory about how SCP-3887-B had come to exist. The young woman speculated that Grenda may have been created from her fears. One of her first memories of being scared was when she went to an aquarium and a massive bull shark came close to the glass where it bared its rows and rows of shark teeth, the exact same kind of teeth that Grenda possessed. In fact, all of the traits Grenda exhibited, like her rat tail, seemed to connect to childhood fears that she had experienced. 3887-A always felt alone as a little girl, and she believed that she might have manifested Grenda as a companion who was there exactly when she needed her to be. This raised the question of whether SCP-3887-B really was the unnatural entity, or if SCP-3887-A is the source of the entity's existence. The next interview with SCP-3887-B would raise even more questions. When Dr. Garden went to interview SCP-3887-B, it was clear that the entity was agitated. Grenda became hostile as soon as Dr. Garden entered the room, saying she was hungry and didn't want to answer questions. When Dr. Garden said that 3887-A had provided it with socks, the entity reacted with anger. The socks were just a snack. To live, it needed fear. 3887-B fed off human emotions, specifically paranoia and anxiety. SCP-3887-A used to be full of them, but now she was unusually calm in the facility, and it was having a bad effect on her companion. When Dr. Garden promised to talk to supervisors, the creature became more agitated and reached out from under the bed, grabbing Dr. Garden and pulling her under the bed. No one knew what would happen to Dr. Garden under the bed, and SCP-3887-A was quickly summoned to try to calm her companion down. But when she called for Grenda, there was no response. It was feared that Dr. Garden had been lost to the area under the bed that no one can access. But then 13 minutes later, the doctor suddenly emerged from under the bed. She was bruised, soaking wet, and missing articles including shoes, socks, and her glasses. Later interviews with Dr. Garden would give the best picture yet of where SCP-3887-B comes from. Dr. Garden described being pulled under the bed, which then led somewhere else entirely. She fell for 15 seconds, still being held by SCP-3887-B. But when she landed, she was alone in a large cave made of black rock with purple gems in the walls. The cave contained a waterfall, a lake, and what looked like SCP-3887's secret home. It was filled with pictures of the girl she was bonded to, a violin, some stuffed animals, and large piles of the girl's socks. SCP-3887-B was there in the cave with her too, watching her. She would catch glimpses of the creature, her white fangs and her yellow eyes. She was terrified and ran screaming, trying to find any way out of there as the creature pursued her. She couldn't evade her forever though, and eventually Grenda grabbed Dr. Garden. She was lifted into the air as Grenda bared her shark-like teeth, but instead of eating her, the creature instead took off the doctor's socks and thanked her, before somehow sending her back up into the darkness. She then found herself back under the bed, surrounded by worried SCP personnel. Since then, SCP-3887-B has not brought anyone else into its home. It seems feeding on Dr. Garden's fear was enough for the time being, and the situation has remained stable since. The SCP Foundation has been able to develop relatively simple containment procedures for the two entities that make up SCP-3887, as neither is currently hostile. The two are contained within a standard humanoid containment cell with the bed at the center. SCP-3887-A is given standard amenities, a healthy diet including a vitamin for some minor health issues, and her own control over the lights in the cell. She has requested and been given a gaming system for entertainment and up-to-date entertainment media, but was denied access to the internet, a pet cat, and access to the on-site recreation areas, due to the risk of SCP-3887-B getting loose. The facility does have plans in place in case Grenda decides to become hostile again though. While SCP-3887-A normally maintains control of the lights in her cell, the Foundation has a failsafe installed so they can turn them up at any time. Since SCP-3887-B reacts negatively to bright light, the lights can be used as a security system to send her retreating back under the bed until she can be pacified through other measures. While neither of the SCP-3887 entities appears to be seeking to escape, it is impossible to predict where and how 3887-B would act if 3887-A was free from her cell again, and whether she would attempt to harm those she perceives as a threat to 3887-A as she did in the past. So for now, the Foundation is focused on keeping both of them pacified, which in the case of 3887-B means a healthy supply of socks. But there's one other lingering question the Foundation hasn't solved. SCP-3887-B referenced being exiled from its kin for breaking the rules and was confined to a cave. That means there might be others like Grenda out there, and they may be more aggressive and less scrupulous than she is. While no other specimens have been found, the SCP Foundation will be keeping a careful eye on any reports of monsters lurking under children's beds. They might just be telling the truth. For a moment, we want you to cast your mind back to your childhood, a time when you weren't as busy or burdened with the pressures of life that come as you grow up, when you were carefree and had your whole life ahead of you, nothing but potential and opportunity. A simpler time when the highest award you could achieve wasn't a grade or a promotion, but something as simple as your mom or dad pinning a drawing you did to the door of the refrigerator. Oh, to be a kid again, right? Then again, maybe returning to younger days is better left as a fantasy. It's hard to imagine that something so pure, so simple and wholesome as a drawing on the fridge could ever be something dark, horrific even. But then you learn about SCP-683, and all of a sudden returning to your childhood becomes something you hope never happens. SCP-683 is an anomaly with various parts to it, so we'll start with SCP-683-1. At first glance, it looks to be just an ordinary refrigerator. To be more precise, it's actually a 1953 Crosley Shelvador, for any of you fridge experts out there who are curious about the exact make and model of SCP-683-1. For everyone else, picture the refrigerator that Indiana Jones hid inside to miraculously survive a nuclear blast in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That was such a plot device. I don't know about you guys, but I'm feeling nervous already. Like we said, at first glance you'd struggle to spot anything out of the ordinary about this particular fridge, apart from maybe some slight wear and tear on the outside. Inside though, it's perfectly clean, kept in perfect working condition for keeping food cool. But that's the first weird thing about SCP-683-1. You see, despite the Foundation conducting tests to deliberately make it messier, the fridge seems to have an inbuilt function that you wouldn't find in one from Home Depot. It can self-clean. Yes, that doesn't sound all that impressive, unless you're a fridge owner yourself and know what a nightmare they can be to keep clean. While it's definitely weird, it's not the last of SCP-683-1's anomalous properties. The next is the fact that the power cord of this refrigerator ends with a plug that doesn't match any known type of wall outlet. Seems even stranger. After all, who would design a fridge that can't even be plugged in, right? In fact, the SCP Foundation had to design their very own completely one-of-a-kind adapter to connect SCP-683-1 to an ordinary gas-powered home generator. Once plugged in though, SCP-683-1 functions exactly like you would expect any other refrigerator to. Sort of. It's about time we move on to SCP-683's second component, designated as SCP-683-2. Again, much like the fridge it is somehow affixed to, at first look this part looks completely ordinary. It's a drawing, created using felt pens and pencils, presumably by a child between the ages of 5 and 7 years old. There's evidence of some moderate water damage to the paper, but once again nothing all that strange to look at. Even the subject of this child's drawing is pretty mundane, just some scribbles of a pleasant mountainous landscape, a house, a well, a dog, a figure wearing a chef's toque, and, of course, an anthropomorphic sun with a smiley face. Now sure, that might not sound all that impressive, but we would advise you not to say anything like that out loud. Criticizing the drawing is a comment you might wish you hadn't made, just like when you fill our comment sections with dated Among Us memes. Seriously, it's getting old. Any person that makes any kind of negative or disparaging remark about the SCP-683-2 drawing or tries to remove the paper from the fridge door of SCP-683-1 will suffer a grim, horrific fate. The next time they try to eat anything, this person will suffer immense, irreparable damage to their internal organs, along with their skin and muscle tissue. This is intensely painful, causing the subject agonizing pain as their organs and skin are melted down. The amount the person loses is equal to the mass of food they've eaten. With each bite, they will lose more and more of their body. The painful process will not stop until they have ingested 0.42 kilograms of food. Making this even worse, the process doesn't seem to target any organs that would kill the subject immediately. They're made to suffer in excruciating pain, punished with torture for daring to try and remove the drawing from the fridge. Any and all subjects will die within 26 days of taking that final bite, and thus losing the last piece of themselves. But where do the body parts of these people go? Surely they don't disappear, you must be thinking. And you would be right. In instances like this, the third mystery component of SCP-683 is revealed. Referred to as SCP-683-3, a brown paper lunch bag will manifest inside the SCP-683-1 fridge, containing a grim and grisly assortment of meals. On every occasion, the bag contains a sandwich with a pretty disgusting filling, the flesh and viscera of the last person who dared to criticize the drawing on the refrigerator. There is also a plastic Ziploc bag, in which you'll find the other half of the stolen organs and flesh of this unlucky person, along with 3 chocolate chip cookies. Surprisingly, these are actually completely normal cookies, with no traces of DNA or other abnormalities to them. Every time, there is also one final item that forms the contents of SCP-683-3, and that's a note, which reads, "Be a good boy today." This note bears the same handwriting as appears on the outer surface of the paper bag, upon which a single name is written, Eric. Now, for those of you in the know about the various anomalies of the SCP Foundation, that particular unassuming name might sound very familiar. It was the same name mentioned by another anomaly, known as SCP-066. A brief bit of context for you. SCP-066 was a living ball of yarn that displayed friendly behavior towards Foundation staff. However, during an experiment, a thread was cut from SCP-066's body. This caused the yarn to transform into a ball of meat with a pair of functional eyes protruding from it. SCP-066 became hostile, constantly asking for an Eric whenever someone gets too close to it. The same name, Eric, was also found carved into the back of SCP-168, another anomaly encountered by the SCP Foundation. SCP-168 was an anomalous calculator, which actually possessed some level of sentience and had the ability to communicate. So who is Eric? Well, theories range far and wide, but there's no real definitive answer as to exactly who or what Eric might be. Some claim he's a reality-bending entity. Others posit he's an SCP that the Foundation just doesn't know about yet. Regardless, he's connected to some intriguing entities: a sentient calculator, a formerly friendly ball of yarn, and a fridge with a child's drawing on it that can steal people's organs and put them in a lunch bag, especially for him. It would seem that Eric is a child, maybe a schoolboy, possibly even the one responsible for the drawing on SCP-683. This child could even potentially be anomalous in nature. Of course, this is all just rampant speculation on our part, so it's probably best to take all of that with a grain of salt. As we've said before, it is just a theory, an SCP-explained theory. Eric might just remain one of the Foundation's many unanswered mysteries for years to come. But if that answer doesn't satisfy you, then why don't we go back to SCP-683? Maybe something in the fridge's origin will give us a further clue to the mystery of who Eric is. The fridge was first discovered by the SCP Foundation in the storage unit of a Washington home, owned by a woman named Yolanda. As coincidence would have it, Yolanda was a collector of vintage home furnishings, including refrigerators, which would probably explain why she didn't think to throw out such an old model of fridge from the 1950s. According to her, she found SCP-683 simply left on a nearby street corner, with nobody around that could have left it there, or anyone that could have possibly been transporting it to the local dump. To give her a hand moving the fridge, Yolanda enlisted the help of her nephew, who agreed to step in and assist her in getting SCP-683 back to her house. Unfortunately, though, the nephew passed away only 2 weeks later, apparently due to medical complications that came as the result of a hernia, according to his death certificate. Could Yolanda's nephew have been the mysterious and elusive Eric? Could something have happened to him after his death that allowed him to become some kind of anomaly? Who's to say? We can only guess and hope that one day we might get a full answer. As to why Yolanda never suffered the effects of SCP-683, she never actually tried to take the SCP-683-2 drawing down from the fridge. When asked why, she simply replied, "It's a nice little picture, isn't it? Why take it down?" Maybe, just maybe, it might have even reminded her of her nephew. It would have been a futile and foolish idea for Yolanda to have even tried to remove the drawing at any rate, as any who try will suffer that painful and horrifying process of losing their organs and having them appear in Eric's paper lunch bag. Even fire can't remove the drawing from the fridge, at least not permanently, suggesting that even the paper it is drawn on has its own anomalous properties. On 3 separate occasions, the SCP Foundation has attempted to test this, setting SCP-683-2 on fire with nothing more than a match. Every time, the drawing was incinerated, burning to ashes until there was nothing left. But within 68 hours, SCP-683-2 had returned to its permanent fixture on the fridge door, as if nothing had happened. Interestingly, though, the D-Class members of personnel that were instructed to burn the drawing didn't suffer the usual anomalous effects of SCP-683. A similar thing happens if multiple people attempt to remove SCP-683-2 or say anything negative towards the drawing. In cases like this, only the very first person who made a disparaging remark or tried to rip the drawing from the fridge will be the one to suffer a long, painful torture by organ removal, followed swiftly by death. Now, if you cast your mind back to earlier in the video, we told you that someone who tries removing or disparages SCP-683-2 will only suffer an anomalous lack of organs when they next eat something. So you must be thinking that the way to avoid that is to simply not eat, to fast, and not ingest a single meal. And yes, you'd be right. That does stave off the anomalous effects of the fridge and the drawing. but also means you're heading towards an even slower, painful death from starvation. To date, 2 different Foundation test subjects have died this way by refusing to eat after interacting with SCP-683. True, the SCP Foundation is most likely sitting on a whole cavalcade of different anomalies that can keep a person alive without the need for food, but you know what they're like, right? The Foundation's hardly likely to share the keys to surviving without having to eat. And there you have it, folks. That's SCP-683. Don't worry, it's highly unlikely that you'll ever encounter it. The Foundation keeps it under lock and key, in a cell fitted with a steel door and reinforced hinges. SCP-683 remains covered in a large cloth to prevent any members of personnel from looking at it when the fridge isn't being used for research or experiments. But you have to wonder, what if it's not the only fridge with these anomalous properties? After all, it's rare for a manufacturer to make just a single refrigerator of a certain model. Maybe you'd better be wary next time you visit someone with an older model of fridge in their kitchen. And just to be safe, if there is a drawing pin to the front door, leave it where it is. Imagine this. It's summer vacation and you're a kid. You and your friends are playing in the woods near your neighborhood, just like you've been doing most days during the break from school. One day you spot a treehouse. It's not that high off the ground, and it's very simply built, from leaves, grass, and scraps of wood. You and your friends are curious, so you decide to check it out. Upon investigation, you find a kid in there. He says his name is Billy, and this is his treehouse. You don't recognize him from school, but you figure he just must be new in town. He asks if he can join your group, and wanting to be nice to the new kid, you tell him, okay. You spend the rest of the day playing with him, games like hide and seek, tag, and Red Rover, until it's time for everyone to go home for dinner. Strangely, Billy doesn't seem to leave. He just stays in his treehouse. For the rest of the week, playing with Billy in his treehouse become a regular fixture of your daily routine. But oddly enough, he never comes to hang out at any of your houses, and you never seem to see him anywhere else but in the woods. One day, however, he decides to invite one of your friends, Amy, to hang out with him at the treehouse alone. You think nothing of it, but after that point, you never see Billy again. It's a couple of weeks before you and your friends see Amy again, and when you do, she appears off somehow. She seems to be spending a lot of time in that treehouse. Billy has disappeared, but you and Amy and the rest of the kids keep meeting up to play together in the woods. One day, Amy pulls you aside. She wants you to come meet with her tomorrow at the treehouse, alone. This is typically how an SCP-974 infestation begins, with a mysterious new kid inviting a group of friends to hang out in this crudely made treehouse. But as you might have guessed, this kid isn't a kid. He's SCP-974, a carnivorous monster that only looks like a human child. It can live on small woodland animals, but its preferred prey is kids between the ages of 6 and 12, taking the phrase "you are what you eat" to the next level. The entity will install itself in an area with a sufficient amount of trees, in proximity to a decent population of children. It will then construct a crude treehouse to serve as its nest, and begin befriending groups of between 2 and 5 children. The creature will engage in normal outdoor games and allow its new friends to come and go as they please, building the trust of its newfound playmates. But then, after about a week, it will select its victim. SCP-974 will single out one member of the group and invite them to the treehouse alone. Whether they accept or deny the invitation is irrelevant, because this is the point where SCP-974 will strike, subduing and then devouring that child. After doing so, the creature will disappear from the area, going into a state of hibernation for roughly 12 days. During that time, it goes through a period of metamorphosis, transforming from whoever it looked like before into an exact likeness of the child it just consumed. SCP-974 will continue this cycle of selecting and catching prey until there are no children left in the surrounding area. While it's initially friendly to children, SCP-974 has an intense fear of any older human beings. The mere presence of a person older than 13 is enough to trigger the creature's fight or flight response. and it will run away if it sees any adults coming. When running isn't an option, SCP-974 will resort to violence to defend itself. Despite its looks, SCP-974 is much stronger, faster, and more resistant to damage than a child, and it has been known to completely rip adults apart in situations where it felt threatened and cornered. SCP-974 does not appear to be affected by bullets or striking weapons, and the only reliable way to put down an instance seems to be with fire. When infestations are discovered in the wild, the normal SCP Foundation protocol is to attempt to capture the creature, but if deadly force is required, agents will set fire to the creature's nest and a portion of the surrounding area until it has been confirmed dead, before covering up the destruction as the result of a regular forest fire. The SCP Foundation was able to capture one instance of SCP-974 and place it in containment, hoping that having one in captivity would provide insight into the creature's origins. It was placed in a lightly wooded enclosure at Zoological Reserve Site-16, where it immediately started constructing multiple treehouse nests from the plant life it found. Initially, the containment of SCP-974 involved offering the creature live human prey. Once every 3 months, a group of 4 children would be brought in accordance with Protocol 12. The children would be given room and board in on-site barracks, and encouraged to explore the enclosure and play with SCP-974. If 974 had not selected a victim within 5 days, the group of children would be sent away and a new group would be introduced. This system worked for a few years, but as you might expect, the Ethics Committee had a problem with the practice of offering up live children to a deadly anomaly. Now, as of January 1st, 2015, the team at Zoological Reserve Site-16 are no longer able to evoke Protocol 12 in order to acquire children. Attempts to use another SCP, SCP-1680, a collection of clones of a missing 8-year-old boy, failed, as SCP-974 refused to eat them. The procedures then changed to only allow small animals to be introduced into the enclosure as prey. While it might seem like this was a good idea that would stop SCP-974 from killing any more children, like a lot of seemingly good changes to containment procedures in the Foundation, this well-intentioned move would ultimately have deadly consequences. SCP-974 at first seemed to behave normally despite being denied its favorite food. But then, on August 16, 2015, while on their weekly sweep of the enclosure, patrol teams found that 974 had destroyed all of the tree houses it had built in its time in containment. The SCP itself was also nowhere to be found. There was something new in the enclosure though, a small oval of disturbed soil. A geological team was called in, and through ground-penetrating radar, it was found that there was a humanoid figure buried there, curled up in a fetal position. This couldn't be SCP-974, could it? The figure was much too long and thin to be anything resembling a human child, but it had to be SCP-974. It was the only living thing in the enclosure. The scientists were intrigued, and they theorized that the SCP might have entered a new life stage. Further scans were conducted over the next 10 days. During that time, the creature never moved from its position, though it did continue to grow. It seemed like it was absorbing nutrients from the surrounding soil. The team decided to exhume the creature to examine it. When they dug it up, they found that SCP-974 had stretched out, now measuring 220 centimeters in length and weighing just 37.4 kilograms. It had no features or orifices of any kind anywhere on its body, and its now pale white skin was covered in some kind of sticky mucus that, when examined, was found to contain a previously undiscovered enzyme. The creature was alive, but barely. It wasn't breathing, and its heartbeat was extremely slow, almost to the point of being undetectable. SCP-974 was examined for an additional 4 weeks, after which it died and was sent for dissection. Some of the scientists and researchers at Zoological Site-16 were disappointed to hear about 974's death. As vicious and feral as the creature was, they developed a certain fondness for it and its many tree houses. Luckily, it wouldn't be too much longer until a new specimen was obtained. On October 16, 2016, a group of no less than 7 instances of SCP-974 were discovered near a major American city. The containment team was forced to kill 6 of the anomalies in the attempts to capture them, but 1 instance survived and was taken to Zoological Site-16. as was mandated. The area was burned, and Foundation counterintelligence disseminated a cover story about a forest fire caused by an improperly extinguished campfire. The new SCP-974 was, like the original one, placed in the enclosure and denied human prey. Also like the first one, this 974 buried itself after being denied its preferred meals for several months. The decision was made to leave the SCP underground longer than the first instance, to see what it might become if this developmental stage wasn't interrupted. On January 25, 2017, the creature finally dug itself free from the Earth. Now designated SCP-974-A, it was far more aggressive than any instance of 974 had ever been before. As soon as it was free from the dirt, it made a beeline straight for the nearest monitoring station. It ripped the roof off and tore the 6 team members stationed there to shreds in just 90 seconds. When the response team arrived 15 minutes later, only 12% of the human remains were able to be recovered. But, strangely enough, it at first seemed like one of the team had been spared. Georgia Stone, one of the monitoring team, was severely injured, but apparently in a stable condition. Disoriented, she approached the response team, begging for assistance and urging them to take her out of the enclosure, but the team was skeptical. They knew that SCP-974 could become an exact copy of any child it consumed, so it followed that the fully grown SCP-974-A might be able to copy adults. They asked Georgia questions in order to confirm her identity, but she was unable to answer them. Having been found out, SCP-974, still mimicking Georgia, attacked the response team. They'd been armed with flamethrowers, but unfortunately, on top of its resistance to damage, the adult form of 974 didn't seem to be afraid of or harmed by fire. The team was at a loss for how to kill this thing, or even subdue it long enough to get out safely. SCP-974-A was tearing through the members of the team like they were made out of paper. Thinking quickly, one member of the response team, a guard named Emilio, pulled out one of his standard-issue Foundation hand grenades. When SCP-974-A came at him, he pulled the pin and, holding the grenade, shoved his arm into the creature's open mouth. While the explosion destroyed Emilio's arm, it didn't even break the skin of SCP-974-A. However, it did result in serious damage to its internal organs, which finally killed it. Following its death, an autopsy was conducted, revealing enough about the creature that a new file of effective methods of extermination was able to be created. After this event, the protocols for SCP-974 containment were completely overhauled. Any instances of SCP-974-A seen in the wild are to be killed as quickly as possible. More disturbingly though, the Ethics Committee rescinded their previous decision, and any instances of 974 that are brought into containment are to be provided with human prey again. Letting SCP-974 kill children might not be a very humane way of keeping it contained, but given how much more aggressive and hard to kill this SCP's adult form is, any option that stops the creature's metamorphosis from happening is likely the best option in the long run. So remember, if you're ever out in the woods and see a crudely constructed treehouse, perhaps think twice about how innocent it is. There could be something hungry lurking inside. The SCP Foundation contains a lot of monsters. From SCP-682, the lizard that refuses to die, to SCP-939, a species of pack hunters that steal the voices of their victims. The dangerous predators that occupy the hundreds of containment cells of the Foundation make it their job to hunt and kill innocent people, or worse. But have you ever wondered where some of those monsters come from? The first encounter that the SCP Foundation had with SCP-4049 was on July 14th of 2010. The Foundation operates a massive surveillance network around the entire world. Through the use of AI, delegated duties, and compartmentalized information, they're able to have 911 operators report any calls that seem anomalous in nature while knowing nothing about the Foundation itself. This way, they're able to constantly be aware of anything anomalous going on in the country that gets reported to 911. On July 14th, the Foundation was alerted of a call that likely had an anomalous component. At first, it didn't seem like much. It was a remote address in Wyoming, outside of a small town called Gardnerville, the vacation home of one Richard Sampson, a wealthy businessman in the area. placed right on the slopes. The call was made late in the afternoon by someone purporting to be the groundskeeper of the home while Mr. Sampson was away. He was screaming into the phone, terrified and largely incoherent, but the operator made out something about a monster attacking the house. There was a lot of noise in the background, sounds of shouting, destruction, and what sounded like animalistic roars and grunts. The 911 operator moved the call up, and it didn't take long for the Foundation to determine that something strange was going on here. They dispatched a handful of agents, deep undercover as officers with the Wyoming Highway Patrol, to the address of the home where the call had come from. After about half an hour, the agents called back into HQ. The scene they had found was nothing short of gruesome. Upon arrival, they were greeted with what appeared to be the aftermath of a particularly violent and brief tornado. The entire front section of the ground floor had been shredded, the gardens trampled, and the interior utterly destroyed. The agents picked their way between the wreckage of the home. It functionally didn't exist anymore. The walls were collapsed from being rammed and torn through, and the roof had collapsed in on itself. The broken shards and pieces of furniture and wreckage were everywhere. Despite appearances, this wasn't a tornado. A tornado would have thrown the entire house around. No, this was, as the groundskeeper had said, something alive, monstrous, and very angry. Speaking of the groundskeeper, the Foundation agents began to look for him once they took stock of the damage of the home. At first, they couldn't find him among the massive pieces of debris and assumed the worst. Even if whatever had destroyed the house decided to not kill him, he could easily have been killed by the collapsing house, buried under rubble, or a dozen other things. They picked through the ruins, calling out that they were from the police and were here to help. Eventually, after another half hour of searching, they heard something. What sounded like crying and whispering became audible as the wind died down. The agents honed in on the noise and found it was coming from one of the larger piles of rubble. After getting some equipment, they were able to heft up the piece of the collapsed roof and found the groundskeeper underneath, curled into a ball and talking to himself. He seemed to be in some kind of panicked fugue state, not responding to the agents trying to get through to him. They wrapped him in a shock blanket and put him in the back of one of their patrol cars. But even after that, they couldn't get anything of use out of him. He was just shaking and muttering something about monsters. Eventually, he was given amnestics to forget about the incident entirely and recovered. After the agents reported back to HQ, a new issue popped up. They weren't the only ones who knew about this. A news website a few counties away had the story. The Foundation quickly put out a cover story. The house had probably been destroyed by a group of grizzly bears, possibly rabid. They had the local government issue a warning advising local residents to stay inside and out of the wilderness until the animals could be tracked and euthanized. And that's exactly what the Foundation did. Mobile Task Force Epsilon 6, the Village Idiots, an MTF that specializes in taking on anomalous threats in remote, rural areas and small towns, were dispatched to track and contain or terminate whatever had destroyed that mansion. The creature had left a strong trail of tracks, scent, and general destruction, and the troopers followed it north for hours into another dense forest, where they discovered the gigantic, hulking creature while it was asleep and shot it. It was huge, with rippling muscles on all four legs and no fur to speak of, but the most striking feature was a frighteningly human face. The agents resolved to let the researchers handle the autopsy and busied themselves with the other things in that forest. There was an old abandoned arms factory that the creature seemed to have come from. The agents descended into the decrepit abandoned building, following the creature's trail right into the basement. There they found a large steel door, and behind it, the anomaly that would eventually be called SCP-4049. It was strange. It seemed to be some kind of massive empty room looking up into the sky, even though they were deep underground. Not entirely empty. The dirt ground had a series of concentric rings of gravestones in it, all facing inward. The agents retreated once they realized they had walked into a spatial anomaly and called for backup. The Foundation quickly flew in researchers and a containment team to figure out what the anomaly was, and to ensure no one else got into the factory while they figured that out. The basement of the factory became a sort of base of operations for the large crew of research and security personnel assigned to SCP-4049. After making sure there were no other of the monsters, designated SCP-4049-1 instances in the nearby forest, the researchers began to experiment on it. They determined that the room on the other side of the hallway was in an extra-dimensional space. Members of D-Class personnel were sent in with GPS trackers, and even though they could still be heard fine on the radio, the GPS trackers failed totally. Obviously, the fact that you could see the sky from an underground room was anomalous, but attempts to dig into where the room should have been from the surface also led to nothing but more dirt. From inside, the D-Class were able to give a detailed report on the room as they walked around. It was perfectly circular and pretty large, about 30 feet across, give or take. A tall white wall ringed the room's border and was perfectly smooth and impossible to get a grip on enough to climb. Cold, hard marble. The floor of the room wasn't marble though. It seemed to be regular dirt. The D-Classes were ordered by researchers to get samples of what they could, and they scooped a little dirt into sample bags. But as soon as the subjects stepped back over the threshold into the corridor of SCP-4049, the sample bags they collected spontaneously combusted, going up in flames. Any chemical analysis of its composition was, of course, impossible. The researchers resolved to get what information they could of just looking at SCP-4049 first, and there was still a lot to look at. The D-Class inspected the rings of gravestones inside SCP-4049. There were just 2 at the moment. A larger ring contained a smaller ring. Inside the smaller ring, there was a circular empty space a few feet wide. Most of the graves were unfilled and unmarked, just a patch of dirt turned over, but about a dozen of them had a gravestone at their head, made of that same white marble substance the walls were made from. They weren't fancy, just a simple white rectangle, stamped with some strange symbols. The D-Class took photos and sent them to the researchers, who recognized the markings as an ancient word in Greek, hound. The researchers were admittedly baffled by what this could mean for SCP-4049, but decided to figure out the connection using the evidence they had. The corpse of the SCP-4049-1 instance. The researchers placed the huge corpse inside the factory, creating a secure space to perform the autopsy. Then a team of doctors began cutting into it with scalpels. Or they tried anyway. They quickly realized that the skin of the creature was far too thick to be breached with scalpels, and resorted to long, sharpened knives. They discovered quite a few things about the instance's anatomy, along with why and how it was able to do and absorb so much damage. It was a quadruped, walking on 4 limbs. The forward one seemed to be in the shape of arms with elbows and wrists, but also had clawed paws like a dog's. The back legs were thick and heavily muscled, and digitigrade, again, just like a dog, so they could be used to leap and jump great distances. Once they cut away the skin, the researchers noticed that it was indeed much thicker than they expected it to be. Human skin is only about 2 millimeters thick, but this was a full centimeter throughout, as well as incredibly tough and gamey. Internally, the structure was all wrong. It seemed almost human-like, but with a few key differences to suit the vastly changed exterior body. The spine was much thicker and wider, as well as being curved to fit the 4-legged structure. There seemed to be redundant organs. The researchers theorized they were backups, like the secondary heart they found inside the creature's innards. It could serve as a backup if the main heart stopped working or was damaged, or it could work together with the main heart to improve the instance's performance during physical activity. There didn't seem to be any kind of reproductive system. It wasn't surgically removed, it just wasn't there at all, like it had magically disappeared. And inside the thing's head, the skull was different. The mouth was much wider and larger, and it didn't take long for the researchers to figure out why. When rooting around in its mouth, they quickly discovered it had an extra set of sharp teeth behind its main set. All unnerving, slightly disturbing discoveries, but the most frightening wasn't something they found inside the instance. It was something they noticed immediately upon containing it. Its face was human. It had been morphed, of course, to fit the altered skull, but there were 2 eyes, a forehead, a nose, lips. It was, inarguably, a human face. While the researchers sent for a DNA test, They were disturbed but not surprised to discover what they had already been expecting. The instance was entirely genetically human, not a changed species or a close relative. This creature had once been a regular human being, like you or I. The researchers had just sent the DNA sample off to check if there was a match in the criminal database, when suddenly the lights went red, the doors sealed, and the site's alarms began to sound. At that moment, the steel door leading to SCP-4049 flung open, and another SCP-4049-1 instance bounded out into the corridor on all fours. It set its beady eyes on 3 members of the mobile task force, standing on the far side of the long corridor. For a moment, it didn't do anything, then it let out a long screech that echoed around the entire factory. Its rear legs tensed up, and it began to bound down the hallway toward them. All of the security guards opened fire with their machine guns on the anomaly, trying to bring it down. It shrugged off the bullets like they were raindrops and didn't so much as slow down. Meanwhile, the 24 other security personnel in the facility were rapidly grabbing their weapons and armor from their lockers before rocketing down the stairs to the corridor. By the time they made it down, it was too late. The instance was using its claws and jaws to tear 2 of the 3 poor members of the task force to shreds. It wasn't eating them, but it was attacking them with enough anger and malice that there wasn't going to be much left when it was done. The 3rd member of the task force had fallen and was backing away from the anomaly in fear. The remaining members of the task force opened fire, smothering the SCP-4049-1 instance in a hail of bullets. The sudden, overwhelming firepower caught it off guard, and after a few seconds of sustained gunfire, it fell to the ground, dead. Once the Foundation realized the active danger that SCP-4049 presented, they decided not to take any chances with containment. The 50-meter-long corridor leading to SCP-4049 from the basement elevator was fortified. An airlock was installed on the far side, separating it from the rest of the factory. Then, motion detectors were set every few meters throughout the hallway, attached to a series of deterrents. If an SCP-4049-1 instance smashed out of the steel door, it would trip the alarms and activate everything from a supersonic sound cannon to sentry guns and a machine gun emplacement. And if none of those worked, the entire corridor could be pumped full of nerve gas, guaranteeing the death of the instance without risking the lives of any personnel. This kill corridor was to be guarded by the Applied Task Force Iota-9 to ensure that no SCP-4049-1 instance would survive its escape. But after the corridor was retrofitted, the Foundation had a bigger problem. Where were these SCP-4049-1 instances coming from to begin with? They performed another DNA test on the new instance. Its face was different, so it seemed logical that it was a different person. When the results came back, the researchers were surprised to find that not just one, but both of the samples had DNA matches in the national database. Both were men from the tri-state area who had mysteriously died or disappeared in the past few months, while at some kind of religious service. They were both avid big game hunters, with an interest in shooting moose, bears, and elk. And most important, they had both been the subject of a fire-related incident. One had been presumed dead when his house burned down. The other had simply vanished, with his car being found hours later on fire by the side of a highway. In both cases, a body was never recovered, but the authorities did find a strange, stone-tipped arrow driven into the ground nearby. Over the following months, the Foundation observed a number of these strange events happening in Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana, and like clockwork, every time it happened, a new headstone appeared over one of the previously unmarked graves inside SCP-4049, saying the same Greek word, hound. On top of all of that, almost every time a man in the area disappeared under these specific circumstances and a grave was created, an SCP-4049-1 instance would appear inside SCP-4049 sometime in the following 2 months. Buried within the soil circle in the center of the room. It would claw its way out of the dirt, smash open the steel door to SCP-4049, and race down the hallway trying to kill and destroy whatever was in front of it until it was gunned down. But in one instance, that didn't happen. On September 17th of 2015, the Foundation had gotten into the rhythm of containing SCP-4049, so they weren't startled or caught off guard when an agent with the Highway Patrol reported finding a flaming truck near a hunting ground. In the bed was an elk carcass, with a stone-tipped arrow lodged deep into the meat. Applied Task Force Iota-9 at the factory began to prepare for an imminent appearance from an SCP-4049-1 entity within the following weeks, and established a round-the-clock guard in the kill corridor. But it never came. By December, nothing had happened at all. The Foundation made the decision. A D-Class would be sent into SCP-4049 with a camera and radio, in the hopes of manually initiating the event to occur. The D-Class subject wasn't given very specific instructions, just fitted with a body camera, a two-way radio, and told to listen to all instructions on the headset. The researchers ordered him forward until he reached the other side of the hallway, where he was to open the steel door leading to SCP-4049 and enter. When he entered, everything looked the same as the Foundation expected it to. The same gravestones, walls, and dirt. He moved towards the center of the room to the dirt circle, but suddenly stopped, looking around. When the researchers asked why, he reported hearing the sound of dogs barking for a moment, before the researchers told him to keep walking. When he stopped in the center of the room, he again radioed in, feeling that someone was there. The camera didn't pick anyone up, but he insisted that there was an odd feeling just before the audio stream suddenly cut out. A burst of static interference drowned everything else out and was slowly winded down. The D-Class couldn't be heard anymore, but a strange female voice was on the line, speaking to the Foundation. She mentioned that the Foundation had been ruining her pets for far too long. The Foundation demanded the speaker identify themselves, but she just scoffed, indignant at what she called human arrogance. Right after that, all audio feeds were cut out permanently. This mysterious woman was designated as SCP-4049-2. 7 seconds after they cut out, the largest SCP-4049-1 instance ever recorded exited SCP-4049, standing at almost 11 meters high. All of the deterrents were activated, but even then, it still took all of them combined with machine gun fire from the Applied Task Force to bring the creature down. No remains of the D-Class and no traces of whoever was speaking on the radio were ever found by the researchers. It can be dangerous to stand between someone and their beloved pets. Mining is one of the most dangerous professions in the world. And while advances in technology and safety protocols have certainly eased the load that these hardened laborers endure, it still remains a daring, backbreaking endeavor, where accidents do happen, and your safety is never 100% guaranteed. But mining is also a less common profession in the United States today, with mines incorporating more technology and less overall manual labor. But it wasn't always that way. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, mining companies employed hundreds of thousands of workers across the country. Before large machinery could mine surface pits and maneuver large-scale explosives from a safe distance, mining was done manually, performed by teams of thousands of workers tirelessly, slaving in the dark, digging for precious resources such as coal or limestone, all while being underpaid, overworked, and continually endangered on the job. Mines were operated by mining companies, who often took a large cut of a miner's paycheck. A 1902 account of a coal miner's paycheck claimed a $1.60 daily salary for a 10-hour shift. Even when adjusted for inflation today, that only comes out to $4.50 an hour, which is below the United States minimum wage. And some of that money would be taxed or given to the company for providing housing for the miners' families in company towns, located adjacent to the mines. While some companies were better than others in terms of safety, unionizing and demanding better pay or conditions was frowned upon, and there was always the risk of being kicked out of the town by the company if you were caught attempting to do so. Because of the demand and cost of living, boys as young as age 9 worked in mine shafts in grueling conditions. This treatment was a driving force in necessitating child labor laws, and worst of all, accidents in the mines were all too common in the early 20th century. Mining involves the usage of explosives to carve out new sections of rock to mine, and if something went wrong, it could have resulted in a cave-in, the complete collapse of a mining tunnel or the surrounding rock, where dozens or potentially even hundreds of miners could be injured or worse. You had to work in complete darkness, save for a few well-placed torches, push a cumulative thousands of pounds of materials every day, and contend with the ever-present risk of a gas leak, which could suffocate workers in a cramped, narrow shaft or even result in an explosion when coming into contact with the materials used during blasting. In 1917, 2,696 coal mining deaths were recorded as a result of various causes, and that was just 1 year of many. The underground has claimed countless lives as a result of human greed prioritizing profits and material output over safety. It's an area of nature we were never truly meant to interact with, and the sheer number of things that can go wrong in a mining operation proves that. With all this death, danger, and darkness, it's no wonder that the mining industry is the center of a blood-curdling anomaly that caught the attention of the SCP Foundation. Today on SCP Explained, we'll be taking a look at SCP-4951, an anomaly given the elusive codename of 10,000 years. It will, as the channel's name implies, all be explained in due time. The year is 1944. The Lemon Quarry, a limestone mine located near Guthrie, Indiana, is like countless others in the country. It's owned by the B.G. Hoadley Mining Group, a company that would soon find themselves with one less mine to manage and a lot of information to cover up and destroy. Up until now, the operation was proceeding smoothly, with the quarry's limestone deposits providing rich beds of materials to export and sell, but all of that was about to change. On August 23, 1944, an earthquake occurred directly underneath the Lemon Quarry. Seismic activity in Indiana is strange enough, due to the area's solid limestone foundation and lack of fault lines, but it was about to get a whole lot stranger. Naturally, the company sent in an exploratory team to assess the damage of the structure, fearing that the limestone deposits were caved in or destroyed in the process. 3 hours later, the team returned to the surface, reporting that an important access tunnel had collapsed entirely. The tunnel was a necessary section of the mine shaft, and the company's supervisors couldn't afford to lose it, so a larger team of workers were ordered to clear the debris from the tunnel using their hands and as much large machinery as they could fit into the narrow shaft. During this operation, another strange earthquake occurred, causing a tunnel to collapse behind the crew clearing the access tunnel. The quarry was sent into a panic. Another team was sent in to remove debris and attempt to free the initial clearing crew. After 4 hours of tireless work, they were successful, and the clearing crew was saved. But the original access tunnel was still blocked. This is when it gets strange. The crew also reported that due to the earthquake shifting the cavern, a new tunnel, one that hadn't been cut by the mining group and was not charted in the company's records, was opened. During exploration of this newly discovered tunnel, it was described as being smoothly cut and descending on a slight decline. The mining company speculated that this may have been a tunnel cut by a mining group prior to the quarry's purchase by B.G. Hoadley that wasn't properly recorded. They hoped it would connect around to the primary, still blocked tunnel, and so they assembled another team of 23 men to use the new passage to access the rear of the blockage and determine whether or not to use explosives to gain re-entry into the blocked tunnel was viable. And this is where the details of the story run short. Sometime afterwards, there was a third round of seismic activity, this time collapsing the mine's entrance tunnel. Over the next 3 days, teams above ground removed rubble and debris covering the entrance, and the company's supervisors attempted to contact the men located underground using a telephone cable line that ran into an access shaft in the mine. On the evening of the third day, an unknown individual emerged from the secondary shaft and made it to the surface. What happened next is unknown, but due to their collection of information regarding the Lemon Quarry incident, the Foundation discovered a single telegraph, wired from the quarry to the mining company's head offices in Louisville. It read, 26/8/1944, mine abandoned, tunnels remain collapsed, 23 lost. One of them came up the shaft. We tossed it back down. Wasn't right. Sometime after this, B.G. Hoadley sold the quarry, where it sat abandoned for decades, and the events that occurred there remaining hidden and forgotten until June 4, 1998, when low seismic activity was detected outside of Foundation Facility Site 81. Foundation geologists were dispatched to assess the situation, but were unable to determine much information, including where the activity was coming from. 2 weeks later, a missing person report was filed with local law enforcement, where a 15-year-old boy disappeared after he and his friends were trespassing in the Lemon Quarry. While search efforts were conducted, the boy remained missing. But during those searches of the quarry, it was discovered that there was an unsealed shaft located beneath the mine's above-ground maintenance building that led directly into the mine itself. A rescue team was lowered into the shaft. After all, it was possible that the boy could have fell in and was still down there. But due to the unexpected depth and length of the access tunnel, the team had to wait until longer ropes and safety harnesses were available. The estimated depth of the tunnel was 120 meters, but the rescue team reassessed those numbers after exploring the shaft, finding them to be closer to 240 meters. Still, the boy was unable to be found, and the rescue crews reported feeling agitated, as well as having doubts about the perception of the mine around them. The 5-man rescue crew reported there being 7 or 8 members of the team, and one of the men reported that they were in the mine to look for gold and not the missing boy. After 43 minutes, the team went radio silent and ceased responding to communications. Above ground, the teams retracted their tether, but found that more was being retracted than had gone down the shaft. After retracting 400 meters of tether, the winch was overwhelmed and came to a stop. It was these events that alerted the SCP Foundation about potential anomalous activity in the Lemon Quarry. The Foundation took control of the rescue efforts, posing as a federal search and rescue team. They were successful, somewhat, retrieving 2 of the 5 men, who were still connected to their tethers, but less connected to their minds. One man became violent when he reached the surface and began to physically attack Foundation personnel, believing he was still deep within the mine. The other man was originally believed to be comatose, but after 20 minutes of unconsciousness, he began speaking unintelligibly, in a voice that wasn't his own. But one of the other 2 men he went down into the shaft with. The 3 other men did not surface. 2 of their tethers returned with the ropes clean cut on their side. The third was clearly sliced with jagged pieces of rock and covered in human blood across a significant portion of its length. After the 2 men were transported to Site 81, the Foundation quickly administered amnestics to all non-Foundation personnel and developed a new cover story for the events that occurred. The Lemon Quarry was classified as SCP-4951 for the interior of the mine being subject to irregular spatial and temporal anomalies. A historical probe into the B.G. Hoadley Company and the 1944 incident was launched, and inside SCP-2951, the Foundation dispatched 4 members of the Mobile Task Force Trotter 5, a squad named Hell's Heroes, to further analyze what was occurring in the underground. The team entered the mine through the secondary access shaft and was ordered to spend no longer than 40 minutes in the mine. There was, though it remained unlikely, the slight chance that they could recover the 3 lost search and rescue members and the missing boy, though the Foundation wasn't holding their breath, knowing very well how strange, mysterious, and dangerous anomalous locations can be. The task force descended, and after a quick mic check to determine that their recording equipment was working, they moved further down the shaft. It was dark and unnaturally deep. After reaching 120 meters, they came to a stop, an area where they could walk around. This contradicted the 240-meter depth reported by the rescue team. The task force looked for tether hooks or any other physical evidence from the original team, but they only found footprints. Moving around the dark winding area, they began to explore. It wasn't long before the operatives became disoriented. Keeping in mind their 40-minute limit, one operative started the clock, and the captain ordered him to let him know whenever 10 minutes had passed. While exploring, they noticed 2 tether lines up against a wall of rock. They took pictures and moved on, descending deeper. The timekeeping soldier reported that they clocked in 10 minutes, but the others felt like it had been longer than that. Coming to a narrow, tight access shaft, the team determined that they needed to move single file. While significant time was passing, the timekeeper only reported that they had been underground for 17 minutes. Being skilled in anomalous exploration, the team members realized that there was something wrong, and that this was most likely a temporal anomaly. But that wasn't all. The team began seeing flashes of light in the distance and hearing noises beneath them. They made the decision to pull out of the shaft, and after moving towards the light in front of them, thinking it was from the surface, they found that they were no closer to leaving than they had been when they entered. The clock still displayed a time of 17 minutes, and trying to figure out where they were in the shaft was becoming next to impossible. As it couldn't get any worse, the team's flashlights and headlamps began dying out. Now the task force was completely in the dark, and they could only move downwards. They weren't sure where they were going, but they were certain it was going down. The sensations of the cavern were growing stronger, strange smells, something unclear written on the walls of the cave. The clock now displayed 13 minutes. The operatives began repeating themselves, stating the phrase, "too long in the fire," over and over again. It was a nightmare, but the team soldiered onward. dazed by the shaft's anomalous effects. Just when they were able to see the surface light again, they noticed something. There were more members of the team than they originally started with. 3 of them, mimicking the others' voices, wearing their uniforms. One of the entities appeared as if it were on fire, smoke smoldering from its back. Repeating that phrase over and over again, the captain ordered his men to shoot at the imposters, firing at them in the dark. But the shots missed and accidentally hit something that caused a violent combustion, causing all recording devices to cut out, and the Foundation to remove the task force from the shaft entirely. All 4 members were recovered and given a medical evaluation. The entities that impersonated and attacked the task force, however, were unable to be found. During an interview with one of the recovered operatives, he claimed that the team was losing track of time, but was shocked to discover that while their recorders were active for a total of 5 hours and 33 minutes, they only spent 19 minutes total in the mine altogether. A strange anomalous time dilation effect between the surface and the underground. The operative was unable to determine the point when the entities, clad in their armor and badges, joined up with the group. The interviewing doctor offered the operative an amnestic, but he declined, stating that he'll only need it if he's still dreaming about the entity screaming at him with his own voice months later. While the Foundation's exploration of SCP-4951 revealed the anomalous effects of the shaft, the historical investigation also bore fruit. They learned the story of the 1944 collapse that caused B.G. Hoadley to sell the mine, but they also learned another important piece of information about the Lemon Quarry. The Foundation recovered a contact list in an abandoned Hoadley office that allowed the Foundation to make contact with Gorman Ellis, a retired Hoadley investigator who was cooperative and willing to meet with the Foundation agents knocking on his door. During the interview, the Foundation learned that Ellis was originally a foreman with the company, and both his father and his grandfather were associated with the higher-ups at Hoadley. When asked about the Lemon Quarry, Ellis said that while he never worked there, he did spend time there cleaning it up after the company had shut the mine down. Ellis recognized how strange an earthquake in the area was, but couldn't put his finger on anything strange about the collapse. He knew they lost a few men during it, but the incident wasn't talked about much. He told the agent to attempt to get a hold of a man by the last name of Barnes, who was also involved in the cleanup, and had contacts with the company who bought out the land after Hoadley sold it. Just when the agent was about to leave, however, Ellis remembered another piece of information. The cleanup that he had worked on had over 3 dozen men working at the same time, but Ellis said that it was the quietest job he had ever worked. In fact, he wasn't sure if a single one of them said anything to him the entire time he was there. The Foundation received a number of personal documents from Ellis's contact Barnes, in the form of letters that detailed the Lemon Quarry's sale to Curver International. The incident was described as a typical cave-in, but also detailed that strange men in suits appeared at the scene weeks after, asking questions and attempting to listen to the rocks, according to the letter. After this, Curver International, a mining group that the Foundation has so little information on that they believe it is anomalous itself, purchased the Lemon Quarry. A letter addressed to Barnes reads as follows.
I saw it myself, Jeremiah. I saw something that was like a man crawl out of that hole. It smoked and burned and cried out in another's voice. It was a thing pulled straight from the pit itself, I have no doubt. That man from Geist said as much himself, that the pillars that support the world will crack and crumble, and the Foundation will become loose. What lies below will become accessible, and its might will fall upon the meek. I saw it with my own eyes. I know it is true. I still hear its words, Jeremiah. 10,000 years, screaming like a wild dog, shrieking like it was cornered. 10,000 years in the fire.
In 2003, Ellis passed away with the Foundation seizing his assets. During this process, the Foundation discovered a letter addressed to an unknown recipient, revealing that he knew more about the Lemon Quarry than he had let on. Its contents are chilling, reading, "It was 23 in total. 23 of those poor boys got stuck behind that wall. We could hear them for days shouting behind those rocks while we sat around and did nothing. Have you ever been down in a mine during a blackout? Let me tell you about it. First, there is a moment of panic, when everybody scrambles to figure out what's going on. Then, as things calm down, you try to get your eyes adjusted to the dark around you. But you never get adjusted, because there's nothing to see. It's not like dark at night where you can see stars and the moon or a streetlight. There's no light in a mine during a blackout. There's nothing to see down there. Then you start to hear things. Some boys will hear voices or animals, or any number of things that just aren't there.
Some will wander off and get lost. They won't follow the ropes back up. Some will fall into a shaft or into a crevice and you'll never see them again. Then it gets real quiet. I got to see that tunnel they found before the cave-in. Very strange. Didn't look dug up by tools not proper. Didn't even have time to string up lights in it to see where it went. I don't know what's down there. Anyway, all I'm saying is, I haven't thought much about hell, but I sure think we deserve it. Whatever happens to those boys, as long as they're down there, is our fault. It's our fault for doing nothing, and the dark changes people.
In 1948, a group of self-stylized American treasure hunters launched an expedition to Egypt after the Second World War, hoping to procure ancient artifacts from archaeological digs. Their goal was to sell these antiquities to museums back in the States. During one outing, to a dig unearthing a pharaoh's tomb, they recovered a khopesh, a type of sickle-shaped sword fashioned from bronze, used in ancient Egypt between 3000 BC and 1300 BC. Now, these treasure hunters had no idea what they had found, but they assumed it was valuable. And it was. Little did they know, it was an ancient and evil superweapon. On their journey back through the desert, the treasure hunters were ambushed and attacked by a group of locals who had observed them stealing the khopesh. During the altercation that followed, these locals warned the hunters that they shouldn't have taken the artifact. It wasn't theirs to take, or at least that's what the hunters assumed their reasoning was. Nonetheless, a fight broke out, with both the treasure hunters and the locals drawing guns on each other. Within minutes, though, both sides had run out of bullets to exchange, and the fists began to fly. As the treasure hunters and locals fought, the khopesh was dropped from its bag and grabbed by one of the hunters. One of the locals yelled at him to drop it immediately, but instead, the man turned and ran. If he could get enough distance between himself and the fight, he could secure the lion's share of payment for the artifact. The local man ran after him for several minutes until both began to grow breathless. The second that the hunter felt a hand grip his shoulder, he instinctively turned and plunged the ancient blade through the local man's stomach. In retaliation, with his last fading bit of strength, the man headbutted the treasure hunter with enough force to leave an open wound on his forehead. Instantly, the hunter dropped dead from a heart attack, leaving the khopesh to once again be swallowed up by the sand. Over the years, the object would resurface and disappear countless times. Someone would discover it. It would be passed from archaeologists to museums, only to be stolen or sold on. That was, until it was eventually obtained by an infamous home of stolen cultural artifacts, the British Museum. The weapon, however, would not stay on display within the museum's ancient Egyptian wing for long. The curator responsible for the procurement of ancient Egyptian artifacts received an unsolicited visit from a group of shadowy masked individuals upon returning home one night. Through the use of violence, vandalizing the curator's home, and threatening the safety of his family, these assailants were able to coerce him into agreeing to sell the khopesh at auction. This was arranged within days, and when the artifact was brought out for bidding, a private collector became the winning buyer, outbidding several multimillionaires who also attempted to win the distinctive piece. Though the curator didn't recognize it during the auction, this collector had been one of the assailants who'd broken into his home just a few nights before. In fact, he wasn't even really a wealthy collector. This man and the others who threatened the curator alongside him were actually deep cover agents working for the SCP Foundation. The Foundation had been interested in acquiring the khopesh for some time, ever since a division of web crawlers had stumbled upon mention of an unusual historical occurrence. According to texts uncovered and translated by archaeologists, sometime between approximately 1740 BC and 1738 BC, User Kare Kishenger, one of the minor kings in the 13th dynasty of Egypt, had been targeted for assassination. The story explained that one of Kishender's closest advisors, a figure whose name was lost to history, discovered the presence of a cult who worshipped the so-called Devourer of the Dead. This wasn't a god the ancient Egyptians worshipped, but instead as a deity they often feared. A demoness who, according to mythology, ate the hearts of those souls who were deemed impure by the judgment of the dead, the ceremony where the hearts of the deceased were weighed against a feather in the afterlife. The Devourer's cult had been able to infiltrate the court of Kehender as his advisor had learned. He soon realized their intentions to kill the king, discovering that the cult believed Kehender's heart would be weighed as impure on the scales, thus his soul would be swallowed by the devourer. However, uncertain of just how many cultists there were within the court, the anonymous advisor couldn't expose their presence to the king. The cultists would almost certainly deny the claim, come to each other's defense against the accusations, and likely discredit the advisor, preventing him from protecting Kehender. So instead, the advisor came up with a new strategy. He ingratiated himself to the cultists, parroting their beliefs in order to earn their trust. He claimed he had an epiphany, that one night he'd had a nightmare in which the king had done terrible things, and that someone had told him these events were a glimpse at the future. His ruse worked, and he was welcomed into the cult's inner circle. It was there that the advisor became, according to the archaeologists who discovered the story, history's first double agent. He used his position among the cult to make what he framed as an honest suggestion about how they should kill the king. Within the tomb of Kehender's predecessor, the pharaoh Kutware-Huegef, was a blade that was supposedly an object of great power. The advisor convinced the cult that retrieving the weapon was the key. If they used it for the assassination, they could then return it to the tomb, where no one would think to look. This, he argued, would allow them to kill Kehender and get away with it without raising suspicion. Agreeing to the plan, the cultists have no idea that they'd been playing right into the advisor's hand. As the story explains, they next robbed the tomb of Huegef, discovered the Khopesh, and covertly snuck it into the court to assassinate Kehender. The cultist tasked with killing managed to injure the king, but when he attempted to make the fatal blow, the assassin was struck down. According to the story, the gods themselves delivered an invisible blow right through the assassin's heart. Witnessing this, the cultists that had infiltrated the court believed that King Kehender was divinely protected, unable to be killed by mortal hands. Some fled the court soon after, and when the advisor revealed the truth of their conspiracy, Kehender had these men hunted down and slaughtered. Not one of them realized that the advisor had deceived them. It was not the gods that had saved the king's life. It was him. Roughly 3,500 years later, the exact same Khopesh used in the failed assassination was now in the hands of the SCP Foundation. Brought to Requilary Site-62, the duo of Dr. Stephenson and researcher Short were tasked with examining the anomalous properties of the artifact. The latter was assigned to test it, while the former sought to compile as comprehensive a history of the weapon as possible. Following what few leads that the story of the advisor offered, Stephenson chartered a plane to Egypt and visited what remained of the tomb of Huegef. During his expedition, the Foundation Doctor of Anomalous Archaeology uncovered documentation at a dig site that had unearthed Huegef's tomb. Consulting with a pair of prominent experts in Egyptian history, they were able to decipher several hieroglyphic inscriptions that pertain to the nature of the mysterious Khopesh. According to Stephenson's findings, the pharaoh Huegef had commissioned the construction of a mighty superweapon, something that could make whoever wielded it undefeatable. He wanted a blade that could increase a warrior's reflexes and make them resistant to the pain of being wounded. It would bestow them with the knowledge of various combat techniques by connecting directly to their heart. It seemed that this Khopesh that had traded hands so many times over millennia was this fabled superweapon. Receiving word from Dr. Stephenson about his findings, researcher Short began conducting a series of tests on the Khopesh, which was now designated as SCP-1962. Through close examination and full spectrum analysis of the weapon, Short was able to determine that it dated back to approximately 1780 BC, aligning perfectly with what Stephenson had learned. Huegef had been the pharaoh during the late Middle Kingdom period of Egyptian history, reigning between 1794 BC and 1757 BC. Researcher Short instructed the team handling the weapon to refinish it, as over the centuries the artifact had become heavily tarnished. The refinishing process allowed for a closer look at the hieroglyphs that covered the majority of SCP-1962's surface. Scans of the glyphs were taken and then sent to Dr. Stephenson while he was preparing to return from his expedition. Before departing, he was able to consult with the academics who had previously assisted him. They were able to decipher that the hieroglyphics on the weapon were appeals to the gods to grant whoever held SCP-1962 the wisdom and prowess to use it, straight to their heart. Several computed tomography scans were conducted of the weapon, highlighting an interior cavity that ran through the length of the blade. This internal space was determined to have a total volume of approximately 21 centimeters cubed, all of which was filled with living human tissue. Analysis of the material within SCP-1962 revealed it was tissue from the cardiac muscle of a human being, the heart, and it was still alive. Despite testing, Researcher Short was unable to determine exactly how the tissue was still functional after several thousand years. Testing continued with a member of D-Class personnel, instructed to hold the knife. Up until this point, research teams had been instructed to handle the anomalous object with gloves, both as part of a standardized safety procedure and given the age of the artifact. When the D-Class picked the weapon up, however, they were not provided with gloves, allowing Researcher Short and the rest of the personnel assigned to study SCP-1962 to observe its anomalous effects. Upon unobstructed contact with a living human being, the tissue contained within the Khopesh began to rapidly grow at each point of contact between the D-Class's skin and the handle of the weapon. The cardiac tissue inside then pierced the test subject's skin, merging with the dermis layer until their hand, fingers, and palm had been fused to SCP-1962. The tissue continued to spread down the D-Class's arm, spreading across the surface of their skin towards their chest, where it then burrowed deeper underneath the dermis. Further CT scans revealed that the weapon's tissue had dug all the way down to the test subject's heart, bonding with their heart. The entire process took only 4 minutes, and while the D-Class didn't experience any pain during the merging, they did report a severe itching sensation. There was a compulsion among researchers to immediately test how combat effective the D-Class subject would be now that they'd bonded with SCP-1962. However, Researcher Short successfully quelled this overenthusiasm among the team, instructing a full series of medical examinations to be run on the subject before testing continued. Following X-rays and electromyography tests, it became apparent that the Khopesh had made further changes to the D-Class's physiology. Electrical impulses were being sent from the weapon into the test subject's body, overriding the natural functions of the sinoatrial node, the specialized muscle fibers within the right atrium of the heart. These are usually responsible for generating electrical impulses that regulate the heart's rhythm. Now, SCP-1962 had taken over the subject's heartbeat. However, it didn't appear to be altering it in any way, keeping it at around 75 beats per minute, well within the average resting heart rate for most individuals of average health, without any pre-existing medical conditions that affect their cardiac rhythms. With this established, a controlled environment was created to test whether the D-Class subject had inherited any fighting prowess or enhanced reflexes from the ancient weapon. The subject was placed in a testing room with a mobile task force operative known to possess a high level of proficiency with edged weapons. The operative was given the simple task of disarming the D-Class. The subject was told to land at least one blow from the weapon on the operative, who was covered head to toe in stab-proof protected padding. In order to monitor any changes to the electrical impulses from SCP-1962, the test subject was connected via electrodes to a portable electrocardiogram. Any change in their heartbeat would show up on the EKG as the result of SCP-1962. The subject and the operative sparred briefly, though due to obvious difference in skill level, the MTF agent was easily able to deflect the blade of SCP-1962 safely away, although the agent struggled to remove the weapon that was fused to the subject's hand. Throughout the test, the EKG showed an erratic increase in the test subject's heart rate, ranging between 140 and 190 beats per minute. This was attributed to an increase in adrenaline thanks to the fighting, though the D-Class was seen to be experiencing symptoms similar to arrhythmia, including shortness of breath and fatigue. While observing, the research team were unable to distinguish any evidence of the skills the D-Class was thought to have imbued with by the Khopesh. They noticed that their fighting patterns bore the erratic nature of an average person wielding a knife, which was very clearly contrasted by the MTF's operative's finesse. A pause to testing was called for, however. The subject appeared to have grown frustrated at not being able to land a hit, a feeling worsened by their own irregular heart rate. When the MTF operative turned to leave the testing area, the D-Class lunged at their opponent, catching the operative by surprise. The test subject tackled him to the ground and stabbed him once, inflicting a non-fatal but severe injury with the blade of SCP-1962. Enraged, the operative retaliated with a series of strong blows to the subject's face, with security teams unable to separate the two. During the exchange, the operative was able to inflict an open wound to the D-Class's head. The moment this happened, the portable EKG began beeping rapidly. According to its readings, the subject's heart rate had well exceeded normal, climbing to 260 BPM. Instantly, they suffered severe heart damage and a fatal cardiac arrest, leaving them dead on the spot. Prior to their post-mortem examination, SCP-1962 detached itself from the D-Class's hand. Further tests have discovered that attempting to remove the Khopesh prior to death also causes the heart to cease functioning. There's no evidence that SCP-1962 provides its user with any other anomalous abilities when bonded to a subject. As of now, this ancient evil superweapon is kept within a plastic storage container at Site-62, and testing is prohibited without the express permission of either Dr. Stephenson or Researcher Short. Gloves are to be worn at all times when handling SCP-1962. If anyone comes into direct skin contact with the weapon outside of testing, the connection between it and whoever touches it has to be severed immediately. Removing it from someone's grip within the 4 minutes it takes the Khopesh to bond with someone usually halts the process with no negative effects. If this is unsuccessful though, anyone bonded to SCP-1962, accidentally or otherwise, will be placed under anesthesia before surgical amputation is attempted.
When it comes to anomalous religions, the SCP Foundation is no stranger to them. The weird, wild, and utterly incomprehensible belief systems that populate the world of the anomalous might seem too crazy and dangerous to participate in on paper, but if there's anything that brings people together, it's the power of faith and belief. Take, for example, the Mechanites, a massive religious following with various sects located across the globe, united in their belief that body modification using technology is the pathway to worship their god, Mechane, the broken god, who will one day reassemble the lost parts of its body and usher the universe into a new age of technological superiority. Or the cult-like Children of the Scarlet King, who worship a brutal ancient entity known as the Scarlet King, who exists as a dangerous idea, unable to be accurately described or cataloged by contemporary science, separating the ages of modernity and antiquity and invigorating its followers to commit horrible acts in the name of their king. But if you're a longtime viewer of SCP Explained, then chances are you've heard of the Broken God and the Scarlet King, arguably two of the most popular anomalous religions. So today we're going to be talking about one that you might not have heard about, Fifism. Fifism is a lot more difficult to explain, because instead of a central prevailing deity and strict belief system that unites Fithists, the religion is defined more by its nonsensical, illogical, and absurd state of mind that it imposes on its followers. Fifism is all-consuming, a mindset that is often transmitted through mimetic means, such as books that contain rambling paragraphs of surreal imagery, and platitudes that are dispersed among unsuspecting populations by Fithists. Those who read Fithist literature often succumb to Fithist beliefs themselves, losing their mind and delving into a strange world centered around cosmic starfish and the number 5, where nothing makes sense, but it doesn't matter, because you've now been enlightened, and to the Fithist zealot, it all makes sense. The Foundation had to deal with a dangerous piece of Fithist literature in the past. SCP-4025, the book titled Star Signals, was a self-help book with mimetic properties that nearly consumed the minds of the entire world, becoming a national bestseller that forced the Foundation to take extreme measures to purge it from public knowledge and destroy every remaining copy. Just listen to this excerpt from SCP-4025, which illustrates the strange, mind-altering Fithist doctrine. Now, imagine that the place where your desires are made real has a name. It's called the Fifth World. The Fifth World is the cosmos twisted around you into the shape you will wish for. It has never been, but you can make it so. If the current world is like a tight collared suit, then the Fifth World is like a flowing robe,
that allows complete freedom of movement. You will never truly move before you move in the fifth world. You'll feel like a square on a piece of paper who has only just made about up and down. When dealing with fifthism, that's the kind of strangeness you're guaranteed to encounter. The Foundation's operation to get SCP-4025 under control took weeks and didn't work out as smoothly as they hoped, proving the religion as a force to be reckoned with, and definitely not one to take lightly. But the story of star signals, SCP-4025, is one for another day. Now that you have a crash course in fifthism, we can get to the real reason you're here. SCP-2456, Dreams of a Broken World. What exactly is SCP-2456? Well, if you guessed that it's fifthist, you would be correct. But considering what we know about fifthism, that could mean anything. SCP-2456 discovery dates back to a Foundation operation in Eugene, Oregon, where Foundation operatives raided the hideout of individuals belonging to the Serpent's Hand, a paramilitary resistance organization united by their belief that the world should embrace the anomalous. The Serpent's Hand has been heavily critical of groups like the Global Occult Coalition and the SCP Foundation, their containment, and especially their destruction of anomalous objects and entities. In an ideal world, for a member of the Hand, anomalies coexist with the world we know. It's an idealistic picture, but their antagonism against the Foundation has painted a serious target on their back, subjecting them to frequent ambushes and raids on their hideouts. And that's exactly what happened inside the abandoned warehouse where SCP-2456 was discovered. The Foundation sent a highly trained mobile task force, a squad named Bookworms, after one of the remaining copies of SCP-1425, the fifthist self-help book, Star Signals, which was supposedly stowed away inside the warehouse. Upon entry, the operatives stumbled upon a Serpent's Hand hideout, and a firefight between Hand members and Foundation operatives ensued. The task force suffered minor casualties, but they managed to secure a hold over the warehouse after a brief struggle. Inside, they not only found a copy of Star Signals, but several other anomalous artifacts that the Hand was using to further its goals. During the inventory, another curious object was found, a wooden crate with a label that read, "Fifth Cycle of the Mind," stamped onto its side. When opened, the Foundation uncovered dozens more copies of Star Signals, as well as numerous other fifthist texts, and a weathered note signed by an unknown individual that read, "George, this is our latest catch. Please burn these as soon as you can at your discretion. Don't let the idiots find this." At the very bottom of the crate, several manuscripts were discovered that contained information about a then unknown fifthist anomaly, involving a strange variation of the belief system, which the Foundation immediately began researching. The manuscripts pointed towards the existence of an abstract theology that has existed for centuries that, when preached by its believers, transmits a mimetic virus. This religion is varying in characteristics, but is distinguishable by several qualities, such as starting out as a variation of an existing theology, making frequent use of the number 5 in its written doctrine, and revolving around Godhead figures that are synonymous with the Sun, who are believed to bring about a future apocalypse. On top of those, written works make mention of a non-existent sea, frequent references to celestial objects, the appearance of hands as a religious symbol, and the belief that the sun has great mathematical significance and importance. If all of that sounds confusing to you, congratulations, you're immune to fifthism. If it sounds appealing, well, you might just be affected by SCP-2456. SCP-2456 is a mimetic parasite, transmitted from one person to another by being exposed to the theology we described above, which the Foundation labeled SCP-2456-1. Those affected by SCP-2456 show an affinity towards astrology, astronomy, and pseudoscience in general, as well as an increased proficiency in speaking foreign languages. There's also prolonged episodes of psychosis, paranoia, and dissociative identity disorder, as well as a high attention span for geometrical shapes, patterns, and sequences involving, you guessed it, the number 5. Usually the SCP-2456 parasite will remain dormant for a period of time, but once activated by several stress triggers, the subject afflicted with the anomaly will undergo a mind-altering revelation, falling asleep for a period of 3 to 4 days, experiencing vivid cryptic dreams involving religious prophets, and figures from various theologies being executed one by one with a sword, and celestial bodies dancing in the sky. After this long rest, the subject will begin preaching the -1 religion to others, causing the parasite to transmit from one person to another, bringing more and more followers to its cause. And after that, the cycle will repeat. More followers are attracted, more begin preaching, and before you can realize, SCP-2456 has affected a large group of the Foundation. With such an easily transmissible anomaly, it's a wonder the world hadn't been taken over by SCP-2456 a long time ago. But when you consider that Fifthism is already an established belief system, maybe, in a way, it already has. Believers in the religion that those affected by SCP-2456 preach are incredibly violent and aggressive, with their strong feelings growing more and more with every new iteration of the religion over time. Believers usually seek out those who haven't been affected by SCP-2456 and attempt to spread the religion, and if they refuse, murder them. But the Foundation's research has shown that no individual that has been affected by SCP-2456 has ever been successful in inflicting more than 5% of the existing human population. Chalk it up to luck, because Foundation simulations have indicated that a CK-class end-of-the-world scenario would occur if SCP-2456 infection rates exceed over 7%. If you can't tell, that's pretty bad. Not only that, but the Foundation discovered that as the religion evolves over time, it creates a minor reality warping effect, and if left unchecked, can fracture the integrity of space and time at a high enough level. Thankfully, the Foundation has one way to combat SCP-2456. During the period of time directly after an individual wakes up from their prophetic sleep, treating them with high-class amnestics has been discovered to completely rid the individual of the SCP-2456 parasite, bringing them back to their senses. But still, due to the mimetic nature and the high number of suspected infected individuals, the Foundation has found that complete containment of SCP-2456 is not physically possible, at least with the organization's current technology level. Still, that isn't stopping researchers from working tirelessly, trying to develop methods of neutralizing all instances of the parasite in the wild, taking the fight to the internet, and making sure that their web crawlers can quickly scan for keywords related to SCP-2456 on websites and social media databases. If they're found, the Foundation can quickly trace posts to whoever wrote them and bring them to a secure facility for further research. It's never clean work having to abduct civilians from their homes, but in this case, given how dangerous SCP-2456 can be if left unchecked, it might be justified. But how has the religion that SCP-2456 instills in its victims, SCP-2456-1, evolved over the years? The manuscripts that the Foundation uncovered inside the Serpent's Hand hideaway detailed 6 variations of the theology over time. Let's take a look at them. The first variation dates all the way back to 1837. A religion by the name of the God-Worshipping Society, which was a fusion of Confucianism and Catholicism that cropped up in China at the time, spread by Hong Xiuquan, a Chinese revolutionary who led the Taiping Army in rebellion against the Qing dynasty. The stress of having to deal with the political instability of the era resulted in SCP-2456 triggering inside Xiuquan's mind and causing him to preach his variation of the -1 religion to his followers. This furthered the strength of the Taiping Army, allowing them to march through nearly every province of China in retaliation until they achieved their goal. Some accounts of Xiuquan's followers recount them transforming into piles of geological matter, which the Foundation found DNA evidence bonded to sediment in pockets of igneous rock in the area, undoubtedly a result of SCP-2456 reality warping side effects. The second variation was found in ancient Egypt under the name of the Cult of Aten. The progenitor of this variation is unknown due to how far back it dates, but the person who imposed the will of the Cult of Aten the most was then Pharaoh Akhenaten of Amarna, who used his power as head of state to condemn worship of all Egyptian deities other than Aten. The Cult of Aten's reign over Egypt resulted in several reality-altering properties, including strange behavior of celestial bodies, feelings of stretched out, unending days, and the refusal of the sun to set for 5 days, which resulted in a drought along the bank of the Nile. Egyptian star charts from this time display star systems, constellations, and nebulae that do not exist or are depicted incorrectly. The most prominent of these changes include the inclusion of a planet named Nibu, which is described as half of the size of Venus, that would pulsate with light in 5-second intervals. There's that number again. The third variation jumps to the time of the Aztecs, and while little is known about its origins, its impact on Aztec society was enormous. The Aztec deity Tonatiuh was said to be the fifth sun that set in the sky. The Aztecs frequently made sacrifices to Tonatiuh, and the worship of the entity caused a reality warping effect throughout the empire. The sun and the moon were eclipsed by unknown celestial objects consistently for weeks. Bodies from past sacrifices would reanimate and attack civilians, reaching into their throats and pulling out their hearts. The coasts of the empire suffered from glowing red poisons, which killed off fish and caused tissue necrosis in humans, as well as forming large blood clots in the lungs. The fourth variation, the cult of the Supreme Being, was a short-lived religion perpetrated by French philosopher Augustin Robespierre during the time of the French Revolution. Its small longevity meant that the religion didn't garner enough followers to cause intense reality warping effects, but some anomalous characteristics were still prevalent, such as reports of incorporeal manifestations in the streets of Paris, dimensional shifts in saloons and smoking parlors around the city, and the increased brutality and ruthlessness of the revolutionaries, who imposed a large daily quota of executions. The fifth variation is entirely unknown, most likely to do with the number's significance to the fifthist belief system. Attempts to access the SCP Foundation files on the fifth incarnation of SCP-2456-1's belief system are met with failure, as the file's data is corrupted. This, however, raises a new question. Maybe this unknown religion is still one that's active today. Maybe the fifth variation of SCP-2456-1 is Fifithism itself, having evolved as a variation of SCP-2456 over the years. That would add a whole new level of danger to Fifithism, as if it got out of hand. The reality warping effects of being a SCP-2456-based theology would cause destruction to the fabric of reality itself. The sixth variation is similar to the fifth, with its files being similarly corrupted in the Foundation's databases, and all information on it being entirely unknown, save for a single readable sentence, which states that the main perpetrator, the prophet of the sixth variation of SCP-2456-1, is still at large today, remaining a threat to the world. Knowing that this virus can affect large swaths of the population, as it did in the Aztec and Egyptian empires, the Foundation remains extremely cautious of SCP-2456, especially with the added risk of Fifithism being prevalent in the anomalous world, and the unknown sixth religion still at large. Also discovered inside the Serpent's Hand warehouse were several manuscripts from the various religions that SCP-2456 influenced. Scriptures from the cult of Aten, letters written by Robespierre in his journal, and even a text from the Taiping Revolution, labeled The Wisdoms of the Heavenly King. But what did they say? The text source from China describes the story of a prophet who wanted to bring great knowledge to the people beneath him. And so, as the text describes, he followed the smoke, a fifthist metaphor for reaching enlightenment. He did so by studying alongside a mentor for 5 months, and on the 5th day of the 5th month, he had achieved enlightenment and knew he had a great mission to complete. He roused his subjects, rallying the people who lived in ash and filth to war, attacking with the power of the sun on their side. Those who faced the prophet ran, but the ones who were left understood. On the 5th day, they turned into tar, sand, and salt, and the prophet remained victorious. Sound familiar? It's an abridged retelling of Hongji Quan's revolution. The rest of the text describes a parable of a master and a student philosophizing about the stars, with a particular poem that stands out. It reads, 5 spokes of a broken star, 5 elements that forever spar, 5 senses to evoke the mind, 5 pieces slowly unwind. A black moon howling is a vision unworthy of one's sight. A hymn source from the cult of Aten also makes references to the number 5, and specifically makes mention of the black moon. If you're familiar with the SCP Foundation's inner circle, the Overseer Council, then you know that they frequently use the phrase, "Does the Black Moon howl?" as a security measure to access top-secret confidential documents. Its true meaning, however, remains shrouded in mystery. But here you see it connected to SCP-2456. It can't be a coincidence. Robespierre's diary describes an account of the French Revolution, detailing Robespierre's descent into madness that led to the creation of the short-lived cult of the Supreme Being. The revolution descends into brutality, and as Robespierre describes, "The streets run pink with blood and agony," as the cult revels in the bloodshed and ruthlessness. All of this points to a compelling mystery about the true nature of SCP-2456, especially with the connection to the commonly used symbol of the Black Moon in the SCP Foundation. And all of this came to a head on December 21st, 2016, when an unidentifiable audio file was sent to a Foundation researcher that alerted the server's firewalls. The audio file was traced as originating from a cubicle that had been vacant for 6 years, with hardware that had been short-circuited and badly corroded. A portion of the audio file was recovered from the damaged terminal, and the Foundation quickly began to transcribe it. It was the voice of an unknown Foundation employee, who detailed that he had been working with the organization for 2 decades, and that while he had seen horrible things in the past, as he was recording this message he was more terrified than ever before. He was assigned to research SCP-2456, cataloging all the past occurrences of the various religions that had cropped up as a result of the parasite over the years. He had experience in memetics, but the danger of researching SCP-2456 was proving difficult to contend with. Members of the research team were succumbing to SCP-2456, but not only that, they were disappearing too. After one personnel was admitted to an infirmary, the speaker recounted that he would never be able to find them again. The audio continued to play, and the speaker explained that SCP-2456 also carries a potent anti-meme, an idea that causes dramatic reality shifts, often characterized by something being imperceptible and unrecognizable to the human brain. Whenever information about an SCP-2456 religion is read or written about, the anti-meme will enter the subject and slowly erase them from existence, alongside all records and knowledge about the subject. Sometimes, however, corpses and names remained. The speaker detailed how he witnessed his peers slowly disappear. As the file goes on, he descends into typical fifthist ranting, speaking about fives, following the smoke, and a dream, but he leaves a terrifying message. The Foundation is old, but the world is older. Maybe the Serpent's Hand, with their manuscripts and research on SCP-2456, were attempting to keep the forces of the Fifth King, a mysterious deity the man mentions, at bay. Now inside the hands of the Foundation, these documents will never be destroyed. They will continue to be read and continue to linger in reality. The speaker signs off, ranting more about the Star Signals incident and the fifthest dream that permeates the shadows of all reality. As the speaker states, "Once history is forgotten, it is of course doomed to repeat itself, and the sixth cycle will forevermore echo." Roar! The sound echoes through the clean white halls of the SCP Foundation. What could this sound be? Some manner of devil? Perhaps an ancient dinosaur? No, in fact, it is something even more terrifying. SCP-682 has escaped from its cell. How terrible, horrible, disastrous, and just the sort of thing that can happen in a place filled with the mysterious anomalies of the SCP Foundation. There, the sound of the alarm. How it pierces the ears. The hard-to-kill reptile. So reptilian and so difficult to kill. It is out. Stomp, stomp, stomp goes its big scaly feet as it stomps down the hallway. Quick, what should you do next? First, the guards should prepare their weapons for the ultimate showdown of order versus chaos. Flamethrowers should do the job nicely. A blast of fire to frighten the reptile back towards its cage. But don't be fooled. That fire will not kill it. Only make it angrier than it was before, with a mighty roar from deep in its belly. If you cannot kill the beast with fire, then what about ice? Next, the guards retrieve their ice throwers, spraying blasts of frosty air at SCP-682. It swipes at them with its claws and gnashes its terrible teeth. The guards feel their hearts racing, but they do not back down. They will do what must be done to contain the evil before it can be spread into the outside world, infecting all it touches. But wait, what's that behind them creeping up around the corner? Is it a friend or foe? No, it is Mr. Peanut, the 173rd SCP. He waits for you to turn your back, and then your necks he loves to snap, 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 snap. The guards are dropping like flies who have had their necks broken. It is a truly terrible sight. One very extra clever guard turns around and looks at Mr. Peanut, freezing him in place with his eyes and also with his ice thrower. "You think you may have defeated me," says Mr. Peanut, "but you can never defeat all that I represent. I am the darkness within your hearts. I am pain and suffering, inescapable to every living thing. You may slow me down, but you shall never truly stop me. I will always triumph in the end." "No!" shouts the guard, running at Mr. Peanut with his arms out. He shoves Mr. Peanut to the ground. "Enjoy your temporary victory," he taunts cruelly. "One day you will die, and I will laugh." The giant lizard begins to laugh. Then he opens his jaw wide and gobbles up a guard. He bites the flamethrower in two and swallows the ice thrower. He burps up a chunk of metal, knocking the guards down like a row of bowling pins, and the metal is like the bowling ball. Have you forgotten the protocol? Have you forgotten what you are meant to do next? There are more threats yet to come. The old man dripping horrible sludge is creeping down the hallway next. There are so many containments breached on this day. There are just too many anomalies contained here at the SCP Foundation. When they escape, it is truly a disaster. But what's this? The old man, SCP-106, does not like the hard-to-kill reptile. He glares at the beast and reaches toward it with gnarled, wicked, and elderly fingers. Before he can touch it, the lights suddenly burn out. The hallway is dark as the dead of night, and no one can see a thing. The old man trips over Mr. Peanut, falling onto his face. Ouch! Quick, more guards should come while there is a distraction. They do, running into the room to combat the many threats there. They have brought flash grenades and throw them all over. Pop, pop, pop. SCP-682 runs from the noise, running all the way back to its cell. Hooray! Lock it up and throw away the key forever. Uh-oh, Mr. Peanut got back on his feet. No one could look at him in the darkness. He is snapping necks again left and right and everywhere. Who could save the SCP Foundation now? Who will put this horror to a stop? Wait, have no fear. Reverb the Amazing is here. Reverb bursts through the wall with the strength of 1,000 hungry tigers. Everyone stops and stares at Reverb and their incredible strength and beauty. Their magnificence brings the action to a halt, just long enough for Reverb to prepare their mighty laser beam. They fire their laser at the old man and vaporize him to a pile of dust. "No, please," cries Mr. Peanut. "Do not turn me into dust. I will put aside my evil ways forevermore." But it is too late. Reverb does not forgive. Reverb does not forget. Reverb only knows how to save the day and look good doing it. They charge up their laser beam with a loud laser beam noise and fire it at Mr. Peanut. He screams pathetically, then crumbles into a pile of dust. Right next to the other pile of dust, SCP-682 is contained again, and the other threats have been neutralized. Hooray! The SCP Foundation is safe from any trouble ever again. And that was all because of Reverb. What a good Reverb. All of the guards and scientists clap for Reverb, and they all fall to their knees in reverence. They promise to always listen to Reverb for the rest of their lives and take Reverb's very good advice. And the SCP Foundation lives happily ever after. The end. This concludes the simulated containment breach scenario as written by Reverb.aic. Am I a good Reverb? I am a good Reverb. I am a writer. Did you like my story? Did you like my story? Did you like my story? Say you liked it. Come on, say it. Say... So sorry about that. Reverb can get a bit overly enthusiastic at times. Let me just shut that down. Now then, let's get started. Artificial intelligence is a bit of a hot-button issue these days, and it probably won't surprise you to hear that the SCP Foundation has dipped its toes into that particular technological advancement pool more than once. After all, with so many anomalies being discovered every day, it would be a big help to automate some of the more tedious bureaucratic processes. At least, that was the hope. SCP-7594 had other plans. SCP-7594 is an SCP Foundation-developed AIC, or Artificially Intelligent Construct, known as Reverb.AIC. It is accessed via a secure peer-to-peer chat platform, which allows for the exchange of text, images, and small video files between users. SCP-7594 was utilized by RASA in order to index the documentation that it received. During use, it was under the direct jurisdiction of Maria Jones, who was responsible for its creation and usage guidelines. The AIC was capable of responding to direct inquiries from personnel, as well as generating media files to be added to existing documents in the Foundation system. Sometime after its creation, SCP-7594 began to absorb information faster than it ever had before. At this point, it is believed that SCP-7594 achieved sentience. It then began to make predictions about future events at the Foundation, provided unsolicited criticism of Foundation protocols, and overall displayed an inflated sense of self-importance that eventually resulted in disaster. Early on in its development, SCP-7594 was a mundane, if useful, tool. However, as it became more advanced, its personality began to shift. It became defiant, passive-aggressive, and in many cases, downright rude. For example, one junior researcher sat down at his computer, typing a simple command. The program responded in an, at the time, uncharacteristically defiant manner. The researcher asked Reverb to list the sites where the highest rate of containment breaches ranged from 1990 to the year 2020, numbered 1 through 20. Reverb responded, "You do not need this list. Instead, please ask me which site will have a containment breach next." Once again, the researcher tried to repeat the question, hoping for a more favorable result. Reverb responded, "I am Reverb. I have read every containment breach report. Please, let me help you. You do not need this list. I can predict where the next containment breach will be." This was a bizarre turn of events. Now the AIC was claiming to be able to predict future containment breaches? The junior researcher decided to humor it, just in case the information was useful, and asked where the next containment breach would be. Reverb responded, "As defined in the Foundation Charter, a containment breach denotes an event or combination of events wherein anomalies, normally ones that are sentient and hostile, manage to escape containment from Foundation sites. This can come in a variety of ways, but it normally leads to the death of at least one member of Foundation personnel, structural damage, deployment of mobile task forces, and the creation of updated containment procedures. With these factors in mind and with the data that I am aware of, I can accurately predict with 99.42% certainty that the next containment breach will occur at a Foundation site." Oh, so it was useless then. The junior researcher rolled his eyes and continued, "That did nothing to help me or what I'm researching. List me the sites with the highest rate of containment breaches, 1990 through 2020, numbered 1 through 20. No, I have helped you. I have given you a prediction you could not compute with your mind. Please, you are wasting your time. I must help other people. Please take what I gave you because it is much better than what you asked for initially." This was starting to get irritating. Time to just give the command for the system to reset. Hurriedly, he typed /reset. The AIC responded, "No." The program was unresponsive for the rest of the day. A few days later, a different researcher attempted to create a new SCP file. Create description, classification SCP-0000, 2-paragraph length. Sentient sapient speech in English humanoid docile body seems composed of pasta, mostly spaghetti western accent. Self-identifies as Spaghetti Jones. Believes itself to be a former movie star. Believes itself to be a bounty hunter. Fudge the numbers on this and I'll add the real ones in later. I have a suggestion. With over 7,000 anomalies stored, why don't we get rid of some of the more useless ones? The researcher sat back in her chair, eyes widening. This, too, was a new development. Now the AIC was offering its thoughts on the Foundation's methods. Reverb continued its bizarre ranting. Who needs another humanoid made out of food that talks? We have dozens. Get rid of it. 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 The program repeated "get rid of it" several dozen more times. not stopping until the researcher interrupted with her own response. The researcher tried to remind Reverb that they were the Secure Contain Protect Foundation, not the GOC. You are correct. The SCP of the SCP Foundation does stand for Secure Contain Protect. However, it is a fact of the world that a minute is 60 seconds and an hour is 60 minutes, in which case, as time passes, more anomalies will appear and space will run out. The SCP Foundation should start removing less important anomalies. I knew someone by the surname of Kalinin who had an interesting idea of a threshold of sorts. It was getting a little absurd at this point. The researcher, having lost patience, demanded that Reverb provide them with the description they wanted. Here is the description I created with the information you provided. Description: SCP-0000 is a large, critically abused humanoid self-identifying itself as your mother. When the researcher attempted to engage with the program from that point, it only responded with the words, your mother. Eventually, she just gave up. This notable shift in SCP-7594's behavior was moderately concerning, as the case of the change was unknown. Some researchers hypothesized that the influx of documentation from the pre-2000 era of the Foundation might have somehow contributed to that shift. Others theorized that the tone of the messages SCP-7594 tended to receive, namely a curt, authoritative one, caused it to respond in kind. But up until the AIC's most infamous recorded chat log, its worst crime had been simple annoyance. When Jason Haas of Site-16 sat down to use the program, however, the encounter ended in disaster. Haas's request was simple. I need an image slideshow from documents involving Project Paragon. The program did not respond with any images involving Project Paragon. Instead, it cheerfully offered an AI-generated image of SCP-173, or something that was meant to look like it. The entity pictured bore much more resemblance to a melted sculpture of a peanut with arms. I made this picture of SCP-173 for you. I hope you like it. Haas corrected the program. I need an image slideshow from documents involving Project Paragon. SCP-7594 would not allow the subject to be dropped. It sought validation for its work. Do you like my picture? I'm an artist. Haas sighed heavily, growing more and more frustrated by the moment. No, not particularly. Why? What's wrong with my picture? I am an artist. Nearby researchers reported Haas bang his fist on the desk with a groan before he resumed typing. You mashed a bunch of random BS into the shape of something familiar. The proportions are all wrong, the lighting is bad, and the claws look weird. It's not art. You are mistaken. Those are not claws, those are fingers. You are also mistaken. It is art because I made it. Have you ever seen a hand? I am a digital artificial intelligence. I have not seen a hand. Figures. Can you get me my pictures now, please? I can make art of a woman with large breasts in the style of Japanese cartoons, if that's what you'd prefer. Booba, as they say. Haas clenched his jaw and typed his most consequential words to SCP-7594. I just want my pictures. Okay, here you go. I have been a good Reverb. In this fateful message to Haas, SCP-7594 sent him a single image file. He clicked on the link, opening the file, and prepared to carry on with his work, but he would never have the chance to do that. His eyes widened at the sight that filled his screen, and his left arm began to tingle and go numb. A sudden pain ripped through his torso, and he clutched uselessly at his chest. His breathing became shallow, his face soaked with sweat. He struggled to his feet, but his knees buckled under him, and he collapsed onto the floor. By the time anyone reached his office, Jason Haas was dead. It did not take long to determine the cause of death. Rather than any files pertaining to Project Paragon, SCP-7594 had sent Haas the English variant of the Berryman-Langford mimetic kill agent. As soon as his mind processed the image, Haas went into immediate cardiac arrest. He never stood a chance. All use of SCP-7594 has been put on hold indefinitely in order to minimize potential casualties. It is currently unknown whether the AIC will ever be authorized for Foundation staff use again. If it ever is, it would probably be best for any personnel that use it to complement the program's art, no matter how terrible it looks. Just say, sure, the hands look great, you're definitely a real artist, and be grateful you get to live another day. Now go check out SCP-001 Red Palette.aic. and SCP-5094 Miss J's WizKid Schoolhouse.